Hi, hello. Clearly I'm here. Okay? Clearly I'm here. Clearly I'm here. But I'm not ready. I wasn't ready 24 minutes ago, and I'm not ready now. So, there's that. I spent 20 minutes trying to figure out why League isn't working with OBS, and it's a known issue right now. It's been going on for like 5 months. So that was causing some problems. I'm not planning on playing League, but I do like TOT, and I do like Talker's Trials, and I do like doing mindless stuff while sitting and yapping and waiting for the evening time, you know? But none of that freaking matters when I log on and 23 minutes ago, a game that I just can't quit. I just can't quit it, guys. I just can't quit it. Blizzard version of Rotation Assist Hakili coming to WoW in patch 11.1.7. I'm like, wait. And so now, I feel like I have to, which I don't have to do a damn thing, right? But I really want to watch this video because the rotation assistant being built in, I mean, that just screams that Blizzard themselves have to know what the rotation is or be willing to like update that to what the new optimized rotation would be. Blizzard version of Rotation Assist coming. And there's a bunch of stuff about add-ons as well too. Well, you might just sit here and watch this video today. I had plans, okay? See? I'm sitting in a game right now. Does my webcam version have desktop? It does. Okay, so we just need to put another window capture in here. Okay, hold on. Because I may play, it's gonna be my desktop, right? That is my desktop window. Well, that stinks because I want to play League in the background. Maybe I still will. Alright. I'm just really curious about this, so I'm going to jump in. And we're just vibing today. I still haven't decided what next game I'm playing. I'm honestly just trying to get through this week because I'll be on official summer schedule until I start reaching out for new gigs. So I should have at least a couple of weeks to chill and prep before Utah. And then should be kind of good from there. But I'm curious, so let's just go, bro. Here, I don't even have Chrome. Oh, I think in the VOD, I mean, I won't be posting this on YouTube, so it doesn't really matter. But like in the VOD, my Chrome isn't piped through for VODs, just for copyright stuff. So if you're ever watching this, which no one will, you won't have the sound on the VOD. But I'm curious. That's loud. Draddy and Max. Draddy and Max, working directly with Ion is cracked, dude. It's funny that they're bringing them in for like the scripted interviews, right? I'm sorry, what? Uh, I don't know how I feel about that. I do not know how I feel about that. That's wild. I'm gonna refrain from like anything because that's insane. We're also gonna have a one button increases the cast time between you. Oh, so it's inherently gonna be like a DPS loss. Increase single button assistant increases the time between using abilities by zero point 0.2 seconds. Cast a rotation of damage spells using the single button assistant. There's so many questions. There's so many questions about this. I immediately, as a healer, think like that's just not possible. The maybe like as a disc, you could put like one of your big crazy ramp combos in there, so you can just be spamming that, not looking at the UI, not worrying about. But this is kind of unprecedented for an RPG for them to be like, yeah, we're not only gonna give you a rotation assistant, but that one button macro that, you know, sometimes people joke about making for the rotation. Yeah, we're just going to do that. It adds an extra 0.2 of a second, which means you're. So this feels like, I know I said I was going to wait for it, but like if you think about it, if you're playing something like BM, a lot of what you're doing is like precast, right? In the GCD that you press something, you're already pressing something that's precasting for the next GCD, so it's kind of locked in. So this would kind of be, instead of a barb shot, and then as barb shot is going, you layer in a kill command. Barb shot finishes, or the barb shot GCD finishes, then the kill command sends. As you send in the kill command, you see that it's precast. You're already sending your next barb shot, so you're kind of like cycling like this. It would be more like barb shot, kill command, barb shot, with a little extra barb shot, kill command, barb shot, kill command, instead of barb shot, kill command, barb shot, kill command, barb shot, kill command. So it does seem like it's a DPS loss, but the trade-off is that, you know, if you this has got to be for like Havoc DH players who are like, I have an 8, or I think it'd be Windwalker, I have an 18 button rotation, bro. Like, what do you want me to do? Could you imagine that there's a raid leader who's like, dude, no, I can't laugh now. I can't. I genuinely cannot laugh. I can't. Because there is someone in our raid group who I think this would benefit. Now, when he's talking about accessibility, I immediately have to walk back everything I said, because in that aspect, whenever you're talking about accessibility for people, if there's someone who wants to enjoy the game and has I guess it doesn't have to default to physical, but if they have something that accessibility would make the game easier for them to be a part of and enjoy, that's always acceptable. So when he mentions that, it immediately makes me think of the special game controllers that you'll have, for people who might have a disability that is specifically meant for them to still be able to play, but you can't move your hands and your fingers on the standard form factor of a controller, right? But they make special buttons for them because that way they can still interact with the game. That seems closer to me like what this would be for, because I think what he's saying is right. Like it can't be objectively best in rating now that you can just like push one button, right? There's still got to be a priority given to those people who are just kind of naturally playing the game. It should be probably good enough that if you were to tell me, and I wouldn't have any problem with this, if you were to tell me that you could do this, and let's say that like out of a 20-person heroic raid, you had 5 DPS, which is a lot of your DPS. But if 5 of your DPS could effectively do this and be like 3 to 5% behind somebody else, but now they just have to focus on mechanics, even if they only use that as like an introduction learning tool, right? If you can't do your rotation and mechanics and adjust to how things are happening, you could throw on the one button, learn the fight, and then let's just say that over like the next couple of weeks, maybe your damage goes down, but you turn the one button assistant off. But you know the fight, so now you're starting to integrate, understanding where you're supposed to be, all the different roles, the randomness of it, and now you're improving your rotation or practicing your rotation and not trying to do both at the same time. My initial knee jerk is like, oh my god, what are they doing? They're making, but no, like there's a lot of stuff that kind of makes this make sense. I think this might also be them admitting at some point the difficulty in games can't just be we've got an easy spec that has no buttons, and we have a difficult spec that's got like a bunch of buttons, and this is the, you know, objectively the right one to play, but you have to have this level of understanding for the class to be able to enjoy it and play it, right? It can't just be like fights, or like at some point you've got to revamp like how you're going to approach difficulty for people. And especially in WoW, there's so much button bloat, right? Stuff that is only used in one situation, only procced off this, only good if you use this. Your, you know, rotations are sometimes people have 3 core buttons, people have 5 core buttons. I think one of my Windwalker friends yesterday was saying that he had like 7 or 8 different DPS buttons, right, for like Windwalker. And you can't push them in the same row. You can't you can't push the same one twice in a row, right? It kills your DPS. It's a full combo. This is your string of attacks. This is your priority system, right? At some point, that's got to get mellowed out because there are way too many things that interact with too many things that are hard to miss / layer onto without having full knowledge of what's going on. I think this is mostly for DPS players. You could potentially, I think the rotation for tanks is probably fine for this. I have some questions about, like, if you're dropping an AoE, how do you do that with this rotation? At some point, you're going to push the button and an AoE thing's going to come up. You're still going to have to have some interactivity with it, but okay. Let's see what they said again. Hold on.
Theory crafting, and it's something that we would continue to update
We'll see if I
with
change it later.
and class changes over time. Ideally, it's born out of the idea that we've seen a valuable tool that players feel like they should be looking outside the game to download, and we'd rather just reduce the barriers to that and make it available to everyone.
Okay, yeah, because there's 2 parts of it, right? Like the advanced is, I want to really go into this, is the one button thing, but that's not necessarily everyone that's going to use this. Like, I think this game, especially new players getting into it, there's a lot going on within a particular class, and you can be a little lost trying to figure out exactly what I should be pressing. So even just using it as like as a guide to start learning your class.
Dude, the max pop-up kind of goes hard here. I'm not gonna lie. Corporate max smile is maybe a little bit too much. Look at him, dude. Oh my god.
Move off of it eventually, but just having a base understanding of what actually should I be doing at a base level of this.
Yeah, so I think this is at its core really good. It's hard on the knee jerk not to be like, oh, you're making the game easy mode, but I mean, WoW players and just people in general are asking for everything, right? Even even I might ask for, I don't want. You look like Guild Wars 2, right? I am gonna have to relearn that system, but that is a wild level of like combination of stuff that you have to do, and like that can be really daunting to get into even when you come from another system. So like I think it makes sense. You're gonna start helping the people that are asking for a little bit of help, and I don't think this should offend anyone that doesn't feel like they need to use this, right? The fact that it immediately off the bat says, all right, if you're using the auto rotation, it's gonna be slower. Let's not even talk about how it's gonna worry about procs. Let's not talk about things like healing. I could not. There's no way. There's no way I feel like I could ever trust this. Even my poor decision making, I think, would be better than automatically assigning heals to something. It just does not work that fucking way, right? The one time I decide to hard cast sequence, Riptide, chain heal into Riptide to keeping that up, and that second Riptide needed to be, or that second chain heal needed to be like a spot heal or a surge proc or something like that, and I can't adjust to it. There ain't no way. Ain't no way. Tanks, their rotation would kind of make sense. You'd still have things like active mitigation or active cooldowns. And probably like taunting. But the actual rotation of like Blood Strike, Death Strike, Marrow Rend, Marrow Rend, that stuff you could handle as like upkeep of your active mitigation, and then you're just worried about popping cooldowns, moving the boss, taunting the boss when you need to. So I think there's a lot of upside to this for the people that will use this. And I like what Max said, in that like there's a lot of times that like you'll look at a class and there's just, Lord forbid, like my priest, right? She's 70 already. So I'm going to go from 70 to 80. But that amount of abilities that I got from level 1 to 70 across the expansions that I've played has changed so much that like if I took a year or two away from that class isn't the same anymore, right? So I need to go back and relearn and learn a new something. And there could be something to, not that you would do it for a healer, but being able to say, okay, let me watch for a little while, see what the sequence is, learn where you're going to put your keybinds, learn where your fingers are going to feel like they're going to want to reach when X is happening, especially on a DPS. I mean, just go in there and push buttons for a little bit. I can worry about interrupting when I need to, do my CC, and I'm just going to pick one target and just keep pushing button, or have the rotation helper and be like, what the fuck am I supposed to push next? And again, if they're already seeing that Hakili is a widely downloaded and used add-on, it makes sense for them to say, you know what? They're probably coming to the point where their game is just hard and difficult because of the amount of stuff that's in it, right? Playing any of these classes, even if you play BM, there's so many small intricacies to make it actually optimized and play the way that it's supposed to, that there really isn't much that you're just walking in and like being able to play, right? There is no difficulty slider. There's difficult content and whatnot, but that doesn't give you a chance to actually learn and flesh it out. And God help if you're like power leveling fast or something like that. You're just going to hit end game and have like 36 buttons on your bars and like, okay, now you get to figure it out. So it should ease people in a little bit more to the game. Maybe be a little more welcoming and inviting.
That's really exactly the motivation on our end, and especially with warbands and War Within, we see lots and lots more alts, and leveling is pretty quick. You got a bunch of warbound until equipped gear that you're passing over to a new character, and just jumping into their full rotation. You've never played the spec seriously before can be a pretty serious undertaking. And for some people, this may be enough for them, and that's fine too. But we recognize that there's so much. WoW has such a high skill ceiling that just recommending what the next ability is isn't going to really remove that or fully solve that. There's still the muscle memory that you need to form, and then all of the nuances of like.
I like I like that they basically are showing Windwalker right here because, again, I'm telling you, my homie who has the tracker said it was because, yeah, this spec, if you push the same button 2 times in a row, so if you're a spammer and you just clip a GCD because you were looked away for a second and, you know, 3, you're supposed to hit 4, you just bleeped your rotation and your damage, you're going to start getting penalized for it. I love that they show Windwalker. This is clearly a Windwalker.
Recommendation for rotation that makes sense if you're fighting a target demi, you're fighting patchwork, but when you need to plan around the fact that you're going to have to move in 4 seconds, that's a whole different like layer of skill that still rests with players.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I know when I'm trying to, play a new spec for the first time or haven't played it in years, it often feels like I've got like a 30-minute checklist of, okay, I got to set up my keybinds, got to make sure, oh, this ability's changed since 2 expansions ago, I got to rebind that, and then I got to go and read some guides and figure out how all my new...
Did I not say, like, you take a step away and the class isn't the same anymore?
Really nice to just have this is a way to jump in to...
I can't with Draddy's picture. Dude, Dr. Atmos is killing me right now, man. That's such a Chad smile. Right in his gut, too. Right on his tummy. Look at it. He's like, yeah, I know you're looking down here. I know you're looking. I know you're looking.
Have it work out nice and easily. One thing that jumps out to me is that a lot of the content I'd want to do would be like delves or keys. And in either of those cases, there's a lot of AoE.
Yeah.
Is this going to have a, are we going to detect whether we're fighting 3 targets, 5 targets?
Yeah, see, I'm sure this is the most obvious problem, which is there's so much. Things can become so dynamic rather than hard set. The game itself is largely dynamic. Right? Even if you have a set in stone rotation, there are adjustments that you have to make. There's a different rotation for the amount of enemies. It could literally be your rotation is the same for 2 enemies. As soon as you go to 3 enemies or 5 enemies, everything changes and you're not pushing the same buttons anymore. Procs that you're going to run with, how is that? There are so many things about this that, like, I see what they want to do. How are you going to handle some of these situations?
Blast, or is it just always going to be a single target?
It's not just single target. There is, some sense of, how many enemies are within your range, in front of you, etc. And so that will affect the recommendations. Again.
So anything with the swoosh is 1 button, I'm assuming, and then potentially anything that's lit up right now is something good to press, maybe.
The goal is not optimal. The goal is not like this is going to, okay, everyone's always going to get perfect parses and so forth going forward. But as a baseline, this should be, it should be useful the same way that many people find Hakili useful today. And really, like a lot of this building on the foundation.
This sounds like, too, if you were to hear that Hakili went, that the add-on dies or gets moved, I would not be surprised if World of Warcraft has like gone to the add-on developer and started like maybe like consulting them or something like that. Again, I have no idea, but like that's kind of what this reads like. Is we saw how popular this was. They probably are getting out ahead. Well, I would say that with add-ons in general, especially since they've been fighting the DBM race, there's some stuff that should be integrated. And if your metrics are showing that a ton of your player base, if you're talking about 15-20% or something like that of your most sought after player base, the players you want to retain, are using this, feel like they have moved to a point in your game where they're less concerned about practicing and learning it and are more concerned with just having their character play, you jump out in front of this. You take this change. You become the MMO that is willing to innovate on stuff like this. You're the granddaddy of MMOs. You say, you know what? From now on, if you have a game, it's not about having 20 buttons, right? It's about having X, and it's about helping your players learn. Because that's something that WoW doesn't do. WoW doesn't teach you your rotation. Icy Veins, WoW Head, streams. WoW doesn't teach you your rotation. There's nothing in the game that'll tell you, with as much digging as you can do, use this, use this, use this, this is better. If something stacks to 6 and the community says once you get to 4, you need to fire that thing off because the last 2, that's not the way that it's going to read. There's nothing that's ever going to tell you to do that. This is huge. Them actually giving you something. And I think what hangs me up about this is that a lot of those default build, core builds, those simple sort of standard ways are like internal Blizzard testing, but like once it gets out into the wild, that shit warps completely. It's not the same. And this would be the introductory version that hopefully entices you to learn this one and then be willing to branch off. And I think a good example would be, I used to be a completely passive player. I could not remember to push active buttons. I couldn't remember to hit my trinkets. Or if I did, everything was in one button and I had one CD. So like I used to do Ascendance, Healing Tide, and my trinkets all in one on a Shaman. And this was like a few expansions back before you had like AG and extra stuff like that too. But I used to be like a one button person. You could say it was kind of a similar to the auto rotation, right? When something bad happened and people were taking damage, I pushed that button and said, okay, right? Eventually, I mean, if you're thinking about like Shaman, there's so many things that you don't have to take and you could still play the Shaman, but you start integrating all these things and it becomes button bloat as well that you're trying to combat. But building the foundation to be able to integrate those tools, I would say a lot of times you're going to go from the passive thing that may do like 5-10% less damage, but it just procs and you just play your character, to, hey, this is more of a penalty if you don't use it right, but if you can learn how to use it, you really start to get more of like a deeper understanding of the class. So
Recommendations of the cooldown manager that just came out in 11.15 kind of reflects us hearing people in the community telling us that they feel like they need to seek out these third-party resources just to play the game at like a baseline effective level in competitive content. And us asking, like, is that where we want the game to be in the long term, and what can we do to build in native solutions to many of these problems?
my God, if WoW 2, like if they end up, and it's still got a little while to go, but if they ever did something where there's WoW version 2 and they're like rebuilding from scratch, I could see things like this being in there and being in there from baseline. And a lot of games moving forward, even if we move away from the 36 to 10 or 12 buttons for a class, right? You still integrate things like these so you can teach your players what to do at a functional level.
Problems. Like the base construct of it, there is a, this will help you learn what you're supposed to do if you are new. And then there is a, hey, I don't want to be the best player at this game. That's totally fine. I play it for a different reason. I want to collect things. I want to understand the story. I want to quest. I want to level, right? And I don't want to feel like I can go into any content and I just don't really know what I'm doing. I feel anxious about that. Like you have the ability to be like, okay, well at least Blizzard's got me. You know,
What's crazy too is that like you'd have to get into logs to actually tell someone's like using one button, and even then you wouldn't be able to tell.
So is that going to like change with talent? So like let's say, is it going to work off the base talent build, or let's say you select a talent that now moves a AoE button into your single target rotation? Is it going to be smart enough or plain?
This is so tough, dude. You guys talk about adding on like more developer load and more stuff to manage. I mean, you have to improve your game and you have to create new systems. But holy hell, this alone, all the rotations and all the different specs, if you aren't getting people in that understand these classes and how they work, well, I guess I should wait for this. If it only works for default build right now, that's fine. I think that's perfectly fine. You keep it super streamlined, only for default build. Make sure you can handle stuff like AoE situations, have like a smart enough UI to swap between the two, and just get it implemented and working. I think that would be fine if it didn't work past the default build.
Smart enough to incorporate a bunch of different potential talent builds.
The goal is that it's aware of your talents, and the logic is conditional based on what you do or don't have talented. As with, this is going to be something that continues to evolve. We may not have every single possible permutation accounted for in the version that we roll out with, but it should still be very useful in that form.
My God, when are they thinking about bringing this? Because this is huge.
Similar to the cooldown manager that we know is like, that is a first.
I still haven't used the cooldown manager yet, and I should.
To add much more customization, much more functionality to that over time as well.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it's a really exciting feature individually. The thing that's most exciting to me is in the broader context of the cooldown manager, of all these other edit mode changes that have come out. There was a time 5 years ago in WoW where if you were just getting into the game, there was an intimidating list of these are the add-ons that you need, and if you're not using these, you're kind of worse, right? Like you're noticeable.
I will fight damn near to the death on this. I 100% disagree. And I only say that because if you watch my stream for specifically WoW, I don't run shite. And it's mostly because of the way that I particularly play the game. I've been even more averse maybe this past year or so, largely because I knew I wasn't pushing like mythic level content. So those things and warnings and high-end keys, like it just wasn't necessary. There's a lot, and I credit this to having played the game for 20 fucking years. There's a lot, if you allow yourself to stop and learn the game, that you can learn and just understand and translate into muscle memory. Doesn't make it perfect. You will still make mistakes. What add-ons to me are for is, for me, once you get that core understanding, tracking things that are hard for you to manage through the chaos. 100% perfect example, I track tidal waves. That is my number one most important spell to me, buff, as a resto shaman. Nothing else matters to me more than knowing I have Riptide up. And the first month or so that I was playing this expansion, I didn't run the weak order. I didn't have the tracker. I was trying to look up at my buffs. Horribly inefficient, way too hard to be trying to look at your UI to heal and trying to look at your buffs to see if you have it. And it caused me to be hard casting outside of my waves a lot. Do I still hard cast outside of wave? Yes. You don't want to, but sometimes it still happens. But I have that particular little thing just to, as I'm going through my decision-making checklist, boom, I might need to say, I really want to surge this person right now, but if I don't have tidal waves, that surge might not crit. That chain heal is going to be slower. Like there's a trade-off to that. That is kind of how I would tackle, or I personally tackle add-ons. When I was raid leading, I didn't use add-ons. I made a lot of calls, either communicating with the team because it was more fun with me. I know people have that stuff and they're watching. But for me, it was, I'll take some time to, at the heroic level, learn the fight. And that became really fun to me. And then, like, as a raid leader, I'm almost like a choreographer, right? I'm just relaying the information. I'm going off of feel. I'm going off of the script and the dance that I've learned. And I'm trying to get everybody else to dance at the same time, right? Not step on each other's feet. There came a point where after a tier, I said, okay, I can't keep relying on everybody to tell me how many battle reses are up. Tell me what healing cooldowns are available. Tell me what ability is coming up. And very slowly, I started to find add-ons that would help me do what I wanted to do better. So I really, really disagree with the notion, though I 100% agree with people feel like, oh, if you don't come in and download DBM details and blah, 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 and assistant helper and all of this other stuff. And I think the biggest ones are really like DBM, like MDT, any of the dungeon helper add-ons. Like, if you don't have those, you can't play the game. To me, if you grab those and you don't give yourself a chance to learn the game, you're not learning the game. You're just learning to listen to what it says you're supposed to do, right? It could say use a defensive here. Okay, well, if your healer is saying, I've got my healing CDs up right now, don't use a defensive, and you just hear defensive, and you pop one, you just fucked what your healer was trying to do, right? There's someone out there that's looking and managing the stuff that's saying, hey, this is what we need to do here, but there's just this script, right? There's just this script of all the stuff. If you slam a weak aura pack into your fucking screen, and it's just got alerts everywhere, and dodge for this, and random noise here, and siren here, blah, blah, blah. That's just noise. And I think Max even brought it up at one point. He was like, how much of that stuff on your screen are you actually paying attention to? What on your screen and what you're hearing need to be things that you can't keep up with, and so you have them there. If everything is on there, then nothing is actually important. It's all just noise. I'm not against people grabbing those add-on packs, but if you're talking about how each player personally sort of goes through the game, on my own personal level, it's easier for me to sit back, watch, learn, research, and then apply, and then add in stuff when I'm ready that will assist in that. Like, I'm 100% at the point in grinding Mythic Plus that I keep telling myself I need to run Omni CD because I need to know which of these players is not hitting their cooldowns in a pug, right? As a healer, if a debuff goes out that is going to tick you for 2 million freaking damage, you are going to die in 4 seconds. That is 2 GCDs. You better pop a defensive. If you didn't have a defensive, then it's on me to fill in the blanks, right? I don't have that to see right now. So a lot of the times, part of my decision making is like missing a few little bits of information that could say, I needed to dump more into this person compared to this person because they were taking way more damage, or they were taking damage and they didn't have any personal CDs because they used it on XYZ, right? That's how I would integrate, or that's how I personally integrate the add-ons into there. When I was raiding, I was like, I can't keep tracking battle reses. I want to learn how to use our healing cooldowns properly, because if I say, hey, we need a cooldown here and 4 people pop a CD, we're all just sniping each other. No, let's not snipe each other. Let's have one person or 2 people stack theirs, another 2 people stack theirs, we alternate, boom, we've got healing CDs. I still need to look on here and say like, oh, if I call for a rally and we don't have one and I'm not tracking it, well, maybe I should do that, right? There came a point where I could feel a move was going to come in, or especially when we made the jump to Mythic, I said, if there's a mechanic that needs for me to call it, that's the timer that I'm going to have, right? If there's something that's going to happen that is something I know that I need to keep track of, that's when I'll throw the timer on. So instead of turning on DBM and letting everything run rampant, I threw DBM on there and I turned everything off. And then when I went into the fight, I said, okay, I think a good one would be, Stormwind Blockade and Dazarlor, right? I used timers on that fight because as a DK, I had learned the cheese mechanic of how you could layer your puddles and soak all of the different mechanics, cycling like your DK CDs, which significantly reduced the amount of play space area that would be taken up for the melee. And I remember now, it's called C-Swell. Every time C-Swell was going to come up, I needed to pre-move into an existing puddle to stack the puddle on the same one. And then as I kept doing it, I had to cycle in CDs to make sure that as I'm sitting in there waiting to drop it, I don't rot away. Or I needed to see right when that cooldown was going to come up to move at the last possible second to dump it in there. That's what I think add-ons should help for. Most people are going to see add-on pack, weak aura pack, turn everything on, and there's just a bunch of shit on their screen, right? I bet if you ask half the people what that stuff is for, if they pay attention to it, the answer is probably no, right? Sorry. I'm going to be yapping. I think we're just going to have 2 hours of yap.
You can't track your group member's major cooldown, right? Like, you're worse at Mythic Plus than somebody who is, right? And
What did I just say? Yeah, that actually tends to happen a lot. And for someone like me, I have not been running stuff. Let's just say interrupts, right? Interrupt overlapping, interrupt cooldowns. Who has one available? CC and what? Who has it available? Who doesn't have it available? I think there was a time where just communicating these things, but now stuff it was fine. We're also hyper progressed past the way that we understood gaming 20 years ago. That just doesn't fly anymore. Or it can, but you will be at a bit of a deficit. If I was pushing 15, 16, 17s and actually like trying to prog hard keys, I've done 13s, and yes, it's like hard, but comparatively speaking to like a 15, 16, 17, to me, that is the moment, right? That is the moment where the damage is going to be ramped up, the intensity, the penalty for dying, the margin for errors are going to start to shrink so much that yes, you should, not that you have to, but that to me is when it makes sense to, yeah, there's going to be a few too many things that I can't keep up with, and my focus needs to be on something else. That, yeah, I need to have these tools, these trackers, these things available to me. And for what it's worth, stuff like this, if you feel your player base needs it, should be integrated into the game. Add-ons and whatnot are great, but your game really should just tell you what you need and what you need to do in a very, very clear way. And if add-ons can do it, the developer of the game can absolutely do it, whether it's changing the design and how things are presented, or just saying, grab that, stick it in here, now it's there, right? Start throwing little cooldown timers. I think Fellowship, did Fellowship have something like this to where it actually had some of the timers in the open demo? Like, it just integrated all the stuff. And again, it's because it's industry standard, but now that stuff's going to be there. If you could shrink down how much of that stuff is necessary, right? How much you need to know X, Y, Z, how much do you need to know to be successful? That's different.
And it seems like the goal that has been accomplished with a lot of these things that have been coming into the base UI is you can use those add-ons if you want, but we now have a native way to the game where you don't have to get an add-on.
That's pretty much exactly our long-term philosophical goal here, right? Like,
This also means that they're probably going to implement a damage meter. I think that they will eventually implement a damage meter.
add-ons are amazing. The things that the community has done over the last 20 years to allow people to experience different aesthetics, different functionality, have information available at their fingertips, like, that is a huge part of WoW's success, and we don't question or want to undermine that for a moment. At the same
Undermined?
time, like, as you said, ideally it is about what do you want? How do you prefer to have things presented to you, and not what do you have to do?
Right.
What is a group mate or raid leader or whatever telling you you must download? Or if you ask people, you know, hey, how can I get better? I'm really struggling at this. The first answer shouldn't be, well, download this add-on, this add-on, and this add-on, otherwise you're doing it wrong. Because that's starting to get into that mandatory place, whether we like it or not.
I think this would probably scream to whatever weak aura OAB, One-Armed Bandit, uses. I have never, I probably have, but I don't think I've ever heard so much screaming for an add-on than in OAB Pugs, where it's, get this add-on to know what bomb we're supposed to blah, 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 blah. When I think the problem really is, especially in that fight, a DPS can smack an ad, like in Melee, and then the thing just drops, and I think it auto-loots to you. I don't think you have to click it to pick it up or anything like that. I think you just, like, run over the token once it dies. That'll bleep stuff up. You might not even know you have it, right? I'd say that that's probably more poor design, which is why the fight might require that. And you could talk about, like, the combination and whatnot, but even if you're a leader in a pug, you can do a lot of things to, like, spam what order you're going to do, spam what order the tokens need to be deposited in. Like, that's not impossible, right? If you're in comms, you can open up a notepad, write these things down, say this is the order that we're doing. Like, it's not hard. You don't have to. We're just conditioned and parse cultured so much that we don't know what else to do, or just the majority of people just buy into that, and then that's the vocal majority.
So yeah, I think, you know, longer term, these initiatives kind of fit into part of, you know, how we're thinking about the role of add-ons in WoW. You know, as we can probably all agree, today, there is a sense that if you want to really be the best you can, if you want to play competitive content, there are certain add-ons that are required, that are simply going to improve your success over not having them, period.
Also incredibly true. The reason I even brought up something like Omni CD was I understand how good that add-on is. I understand exactly how good that add-on is. Information in most cases is king. Money, cash is king. Information, knowledge is king. Knowing what's available to inform your decision making and taking away one or two parts of the decision tree, right? If you've got to go here and you got decisions here, you got here with a branch here, but then you have a branch here, branch here, branch here. If you literally can cut all this stuff out and say, no, these are the two paths right here, and you leave yourself two options, sometimes even one option, becomes really, really clear. And that can just be from who has their CDs available right now. Not everybody has personals. All right, sit on them. Let the healer take care of it. I'll pump through this. The next one, you guys help me out. There you go. That's a problem solved right there.
We would like to get away from that being the case. I think I'd love to see a WoW one day where you can still customize the aesthetic look of your UI. You can have information and quest helpers and all the other things that you might want to have to make your experience a bit more seamless. But that at the end of the day, when you're in competitive content, when you're queuing up for a rated PvP match, when you're going into a high key, when you're trying to get a first kill on a raid boss, there isn't the sense that you are, just holding yourself back if you're not using specific tools. We know that there's a lot of work to do to get to a place where that could be the reality. The first steps really are going to be continuing to build up the just right out of the box functionality that World of Warcraft offers to shrink that gap. But at the same time, I think we're aware that at the very end of this process, we probably are going to have to rein in some of the functionality that add-ons currently have to do like real-time in-combat problem solving specifically, where it's like...
Ooh. Yo. I think that comment needs to seriously be looked at. And I don't mean that in a bad way.
World of Warcraft offers to shrink that gap. But at the same time, I think we're aware that at the very end of this process, we probably are going to have to rein in some of the functionality that add-ons currently have to do like real-time in-combat problem solving specifically, where it's like...
DBM developer just dropped to their knees in a Target parking lot. I shit you not. Oh, wow. Okay. I think there's a lot in that. I think there is a lot to take away from that. I don't think this is the first time that WoW has said, yeah, add-ons are kind of a big deal. We'd like to work on it. This feels like one of the most... what's a good way to say it? I think they're finally drawing their line in the sand. I think that there's this tightrope walk right now of... I don't think you can kill add-on support. And specifically, I think DBM is the biggest culprit here, where they're maybe saying, I am not some mythic raider. So, but I'm going to try, if there are some mythic fights that you can write the problem in to an add-on and it gives you the solution, that might be some of the automation of an add-on that might be kind of crossing the line for them, right? I think they've been in an arms race, but at some point, you have to stop fighting. It's gonna be weird. You're going to have to stop fighting with them, and you're just going to have to dominate your own space. If they want to limit some of this functionality, you have to take some of that power and just say, it's here already. It's already here. You don't need to do this anymore. Which I think is going to lead to things like... it's a bad technical way to say it, parts of the API not being able to be accessed in the same way so that you can't problem solve how things do it today. I'm thinking of I'm thinking of Sprocketmonger for some reason, and the add-on, the DBM add-on that Liquid has in their pack, that shows the pattern that the bombs are going to go in and then assigns them to the area, right? Maybe that's considered over the line. Like giving you a straight up map of that might be over the line. Maybe auto assigning groups in a chaotic situation that you're supposed to figure out yourself. Maybe things like that, where it like spits out XYZ go left, XYZ go middle, XYZ go right. Some of that stuff can probably either be done on the fly or coordinated beforehand and then just reacted to with like small changes because of the fight and randomness and whatnot. But it feels like that's kind of where they're starting to say, we're tired of fighting you guys at private orders. We're tired of saying that you can do this and you can't do this anymore. You have to, and this is unfortunate, but you have to be a hard ass at some point, right? If they want to brick add-ons and as much as, because I mean, there's a ripple effect, right? You're going to start screwing with people's jobs and liveliness here, right? If you remove details or if you integrate and make a combat log, potentially bad example, let's say hypothetical. Let's say they were get rid of the combat log or the damage meter, and you've got the WoW built-in damage meter now. There's not as many reasons to grab details, especially if WoW is doing some of the same thing. Lord help if they've reverse engineered details or are working with the details developer into like, hey, we're going to bring you on board, help you develop one for us, and now we're going to have you move off that project, right? Even if they're not doing something like that, you're looking at X developer, Y developer of an add-on that might have a Patreon, that might be getting their like financial income from supporting this. This could be their job, and you're going to be changing the way that they can do that, limiting the functionality that they have, changing the scope that their product delivers. That's huge. That's really huge. There could be some commendation for the fact that maybe they understand this and haven't been as pressured on add-on developers, because when you see like Team Liquid, they've got their add-on developer in-house actively coding, actively changing and pushing out updates for them to help work and solve their boss. You can see both sides of that, of like, if that person doesn't show up to the TL raid house because there's no working add-on for them anymore, that's that person's job and livelihood, right? At the same time, in real time, seeing that these guys have an advantage that they're able to write this stuff so fast and push it out, but then the rest of the community can only learn because that thing exists, or feel that they can only learn because that thing exists. That could be a problem where they say, we can't keep doing this, right? Like, we don't want you guys to be able to like develop an add-on on the fly that can solve this problem, and it always is walking like, hey, you weren't supposed to be able to figure that out, hey, yeah, we're okay with it, but it did a little bit too much, or like, hey, no, this is like, it could be so random and ambiguous in what they're trying to solve and how they expected them to solve it, that it could start violating terms, and you got to just say, no, enough is enough. Enough is enough.
Like automating coordination, communication in ways that are always going to be better than anything the UI can natively provide you, as long as they remain possible.
Yeah, so that movie.
Oh, I want to listen to that again. I genuinely feel like that's them saying, we are trying our best to integrate as much necessary stuff, and then once we do and we have it solid, we're going to start. And I don't, it's like, I have like the worst examples right now, but imagine like Questy. Maybe they're like, hey, Questy's fast turn in, or the direction that it takes you when it's like auto pathing you and telling you what quest to take for the optimal route. Maybe that's a bad example. They say like, maybe that doesn't fly, but we're fine with you changing, you know, the quest boxes and like the character models to give you like a more immersive feel, right? Once they start like drawing a line between, this is more of a utility, and then this one affects gameplay, and separating the two. It feels like they're starting to say, we've talked about it, guys. We've really talked about it, but at some point, this has to stop, right? I wonder what happened recently for them to be like, okay, we need to integrate these things and we need to rein in finally what these guys can do to make everybody else feel like there's level playing field.
Continuing to build up the just right out of the box functionality that World of Warcraft offers to shrink that gap. But at the same time, I think we're aware that at the very end of this process, we probably are going to have to rein in some of the functionality that add-ons currently have to do like real-time in-combat problem solving specifically, where it's like automating, coordination, communication.
I love this. Dratty seems cool and interested. And this is not fair to Max at all. I'm such a Max fan. Please don't hate me. But Max, when he says this, feels like he's looking at Bart's job. Like, oh, fine. Oh, fine. Because I feel like this, what Ian is saying, is targeted at some of these types of players. Some of your high-end Mythic Raiders and your Mythic Plus players. Because we're saying that add-on shouldn't just tell you this person and this person and this person and this person go to these places. You do that, you keep it in a notepad, or you keep that as like a piece of information that you can recall and take pride in the fact that you can manage it on the fly and not just be like, all right, so we had this. And it's weird, right? Because like, what's the difference between assigning who's supposed to pop the bombs on Sprocket, eventually figuring out the patterns of where the bombs spawn, telling the people which bomb they're supposed to pop so they can go there and what order they're supposed to pop in, compared to literally doing all that and then putting a picture of that as a representation for the add-on. There's really not much. If you're to do the exact same thing and have 6 paint windows open and just go off each one, eventually learning the rotation anyway, the big thing is that in the moment when everything is going on and you're tired, you've been raiding, you're trying to keep up with all the other information, you're trying to maximize your DPS, you're trying to pre-move, you're trying to cast on the move, you're trying to fit in and do everything you can. Ah, shit, I have the bomb. I forgot to head over to bomb 3, and it's a different formation than sequence 2. You can still do that stuff outside of the game. Maybe the map in game is too much, but also what's the difference, right? This is such a tough area for these guys. I'm sure they've been fighting this battle forever. Max does look like he just said, yeah, we're going to make sure add-ons can't help solve as much anymore. And then Max also kind of thinking in his head, like, I mean, we did Gallywix just fine. Right? Gallywix was supposed to be, hey, there's no dungeon journal, there's no information, you guys got to figure it out. And they're like, yeah, we did it in like less pools than some of the other hard bosses. We're fine.
In ways that are always going to be better than anything the UI can natively provide you, as long as they remain possible.
Yeah, so that moves us into like raid bosses where I don't want to name any names, but there are people who have optimized a little bit of their own fun out of the game sometimes. I don't know where any of them might be sitting. They could be anywhere. They could be in this room with us.
I am the like number one. Let's just YOLO this. Let's just do the fight. Let's make it work. And then sometimes it gets to let's try to make something that can be 95% successful, 100 or 99, right? And there's a lot of frustration with the tech involved with that. I would definitely be. I think a lot of the rating community would.
I'm gonna get some more coffee here in a second.
You know, I think a well-designed mechanic that the game giving you enough information to solve this on your own realistically. A lot of the times the community will just use one because it's like what everyone else uses, it gets you in the same place. But if that doesn't exist and the game is giving you that information, it's objectively better, right?
And even if you are doing it very well, you know, manually, it's always going to be better to do it perfectly in a competitive situation. Having watched, you know, your raid leading, for example, over many, many years over the Race to World First, like years ago, you would call much more stuff verbally, like going back to you know, Legion, BFA era, whereas nowadays it seems like if there is something you're calling repeatedly on attempts, the first thing you're doing is asking if, hey, can we automate this?
And so that's specifically what I think Ian is talking about, and I think he's definitely targeting the competitive scene, in that we don't want the add-on to take care of, we don't want an add-on to take care of everything for you, right? We should be able to tell you while also saying, this is enough information, don't push for more, work with what you have, and then don't cross a theoretical line to automate it.
Get in the
Which is
business
fair.
of talking, which seems like it might be less enjoyable for you as a raid leader.
Yeah. Oh, I mean, if we're talking about that, I could talk all day
Sure.
about that. Yeah. No, I mean, I felt like you certainly had more of an impact when you had the ability to, influence the fight more. But the reality is just getting some way to automate it for your players is just better. It is funny. Like when I do that now, I think.
I'm gonna go get some coffee, but I think it's just a testament to how imperfect we are as humans, that sometimes just automating stuff is better, because it's just, we can only do so much, right? Even when you're playing at the absolute limit and pushing yourself to the wall, you can still just fuck up. And sometimes it's just easier to have something that can make sure that you don't fuck up. And when you're at the competitive level, if you fuck up and the other team does not fuck up, you're fucked. Be right back.
What else can I be doing?
I just had this thought as I was sitting down, but I feel like they got Dratty and Max because they are trying to sow the seeds of a change, a wave of change within add-ons. And these are like two of the most popular voices and personalities in the community right now. And what better way to soften the blow than to have two people that you more or less trust, to be like, just having a conversation about this stuff. If we're gonna tell some of the top raiders in the world right here, right now, that add-ons are gonna change, might as well tell these guys.
Time I could be like looking at other ways to optimize it. It's purely for the sake of getting better. So yeah, for my own enjoyment, yeah, that's sweet. Let's do that. I'm trying to wonder also about those kind of mechanics. So like, what bosses have existed in my head? I think in the past couple of years, there's not many, but have been defined by, when we're progressing this boss, we feel like maybe we're progressing before. Something like Brood Twister or Echo of Neltharion.
So I've heard Max use this term before. I've 100% heard him use this term before, and I wish I could pinpoint it. Maybe do some research and find it. But he has mentioned that, I'll let him go into it. I don't want to overtake it. But like, I have 100% heard Max mention this before, that if a fight is designed where you're learning how to understand the add-on and not the fight, then the fight design is bad. And I think that's fair.
Or Jailer maybe was one of the first ones, right? And those mechanics, I feel like, could not have been done, or probably would have been nerfed without weak auras, or having that effectiveness of that reduced. What do you do as a fight designer now? Do you I know you're obviously like really passionate about raiding. You've raided for a really long time. Do you have to avoid those kind of assignment mechanics? Are there things in game you can use to like naturally sort out those things? Like, do you give more time for the mechanics? Like do you have to stray away from assignments in general because the community has just, whether you like it or not, has like trained themselves to have something solve that for them? Do you have to like go back into like a more simple version of that? Do you find other ways to make fights difficult? There's obviously a bunch of ways to do that.
This has been something that's been out there for a while, which is, I think the broader question is this. We've hit a point where difficulty seems to be perfect execution and dealing with multiple things at once. It seems like we've come to rate designs that are trying to throw as much at you, partially, or maybe even largely, because 20 years of rating has just simply changed how raiders approach, right? I look at classic fights now, I'm sure most people do, and like, that stuff's not hard. It's not hard. Even today, with some of the things that have multiple billions of mechanics, a lot of times you can kind of water it down to like, it's not that hard. You can grasp it. But a classic raider looking at us today and us looking at a classic raider, there's no correlation between the two. If anything, you can see how maybe the community asks for harder and harder and harder and harder content. And the difficulty is creating new ways to increase difficulty. That isn't just, it hits harder, has more health, has 2, 3, 4 more mechanics that you need to learn, is punishing because, you know, if you don't have optimal DPS, optimal rotation, optimal movement, which is still fun for some people. But even I would like to know, what is a difficult game that is still enjoyable but would be considered accessible, still easy in a sense, right? How do you, and this is more of a developer question and a rhetorical one, like, how do you create a fight that isn't as bloated as some fights today with a dungeon journal that just runs down for 3 theoretical WoW pages compared to a fight like Classic, where you just need to kind of stand there and exist and not really move around too much, and you'll win. Both of those are obviously going to see a level of engagement that enjoys it and a level that says, this isn't challenging enough, I need more, I need more. That's where I think this is, because when you're thinking about, are you designing it around the need for add-ons, you're designing it around how many complicated mechanics have we put in here, and how are these, number one, either fun callbacks to mechanics that you've done, or new innovative mechanics that people haven't seen. How can you keep coming up with a new thing, new thing, new thing, new thing, new thing, new thing? It's kind of like Final Fantasy. Not a Final Fantasy raider, was a watcher. But it seemed like some of the things that they were going through were bits and pieces that have come from different fights, right? There's a core understanding of like, this is a cardinal stack or something like that, right? This is your group soak. This is your, I think it's more called split party or something like that. It was learning those core mechanics and then having to apply them. It seems like apply them in different ways and then eventually getting variations on that, right? You're used to it working this way. Maybe we've added a wrinkle for this fight that says you can do it this way, but you also need to handle this or solve this problem with it while you're doing it, right? Giving you problems to solve while you're doing things that you know how to do is probably a good way to increase difficulty. I don't know that it's, the add-on portion seems like it's more about solving the problem that's put there, but I wouldn't agree that the encounter design is influenced by that. I think it's influenced by the difficulty of the mechanics that you're presenting in your current space and how much it feels like I could figure this out if I had a few minutes to work through it, compared to, oh, this is ridiculous, the human brain can't process this, and you have 2.5 seconds to react to it. No, we need to put a reminder 5 seconds ahead to tell everybody to look out for it, and then pre-assign and have the add-on solve it, because in those 2.5 seconds, if we don't hit it, then we just get screwed. That's not exactly fun, right? If human reaction time is capping out right now at 1.5 seconds or 500ths of a second or something like that, requiring that amount of time or less or only a minuscule amount above that can just be more stress than anything, and say, well, if you're asking for a robot to be able to do these mechanics, we're going to implement a robot to do these mechanics. And the robot in this situation are add-ons.
The way we design encounters has been influenced in significant ways by the way players use add-ons. I know, the community sometimes speculates that, this was built clearly to require an add-on. I can't say that's never the case. No encounter designer is ever sitting around saying, all right, we're going to make this mechanic, and then players will write this weak order to solve it this way. Mission accomplished, let's ship the boss. But when we're thinking about the overall pacing of a fight, the tuning, we might get feedback on a fight that it feels like there isn't enough going on, when in actuality, there are 4 or 5 mechanics going on, but add-ons are largely compartmentalizing and making it so that most players don't have to think about them most of the time. And then players give us feedback that, hey, this fight felt a little bit slow, like I was just punching the boss for 3 minutes. And so then maybe we add another mechanic in the next iteration of that, or a similar encounter. We get to a higher overall complexity space where, there's just, you look at the dungeon journal and you're scrolling and scrolling and scrolling, and maybe half of it doesn't even matter because add-ons are going to handle it for you. I think that's not a great place for things to land. It also definitely ties our hands in some ways. Like, I think we do fewer coordination mechanics than we used to. Like, there used to be, if you look at old school WoW days, there were encounters where, the primary challenge for your raid was by design coordinating some rotation. And the execution beyond that wasn't super complicated, but making sure that this thing stayed soaked, or that, you were rotating people through with their debuff or whatever, that became a big part of the fight's challenge. Now we know ultimately that that can never be the thing that we lean on for challenge, because it's going to be solved, and it's not going to be solved through what we think of as the more interesting MMOE communication, cooperation,
Natty.
figuring out
Natty.
systems for having these things work in a way that feels collaborative. It's going to be downloading the weak aura pack, setting it up appropriately, maybe having 3 or 4 frustrating wipes because there was a typo in the configuration, that's not.
That is progressing the weak aura. That is 100% progressing the weak aura right there, and that's a nightmare.
What I think anyone really wants raiding to be. And so we move away from making those mechanics as much.
That's... Damn. That's sad. That's actually, when you stop and think about it, that's incredibly sad from a design point. Hold on a second, guys. I was convinced I was downwind of something that wasn't going to be helpful for anybody.
And lean more on things that add-ons can't solve for you.
So, I think what I was saying was, imagine from a design perspective that one of the cool ways you think people can interact with your raid is relying on one another, right? Communication. Adjusting on the fly real time, right? You like the coordination, you like the dance. This almost feels, I think this is wrong, but it feels kind of like Final Fantasy, because Final Fantasy felt more like the coordinated dance of what you were doing. I could be wrong, but just imagine that that is your design philosophy, and you make 3 fights, and you're like, all right, they're gonna, have to stay in comms, and they're gonna need to figure out who has this and who doesn't have this, and you've got, a small window of time to figure it out, but we think we gave you enough time that's fair, right? And then all of a sudden, every single time you design a fight, everyone gets to that point and they say, all right, write the weak aura, and it's just cooked, right? You write the weak aura, you plug in the names, and everyone knows where to go, and now it's just a distant memory. You create a second fight, you see they do it again. You create a third fight with emphasis on that, and it's you gotta figure this out. We've changed a couple of things. We've reintroduce the mechanic in a way that we think is the new updated version, right? We know you guys are used to handling it like A, but maybe if we put a few wrinkles on there, now it's the 2025 version, and you've got to come out up. They fucking solved it with an add-on again. God damn it. Okay, that's gotta suck. That has to absolutely suck. And I can hear part of In saying like, we just don't do it anymore. We just said fuck it. Every time we told you guys to do one of those mechanics, you guys said, that's too hard, and I'm going to do it with an add-on. I got 7 other things to worry about, right? Well, if you guys had not solved it with an add-on, those other 7 things would be more impactful because you're trying to juggle them while you're still dealing with the human element that we wanted to incorporate. And that feels a lot like Gallywix, right? We're not going to tell you anything, okay? That's the difficulty that we want. And we think we've set the bar enough to pressure you guys while also adding in the fact that you can't go look and find these things. You've got to catalog it, right? For an experiment, I think it was a good experiment. The implementation didn't deliver as expected, right? We wanted the difficulty to not be, we wanted the difficulty to be in learning the fight, not plugging all of the freaking spells that you data mined into your add-on and then adjusting your timers to what you see in the fight and how we design the fight, and then proccing the add-on along with the fight, right? They wanted it to be, you don't know anything, however you guys end up solving it is going to be what we have to adjust to in the future, right? But we want you guys to, you don't know anything here, you got to solve it, and that'll be the fun, that'll be the intensity, that'll be the difficulty, right? The top end people said, you kind of underestimate how well we'd be able to do that, and so like it didn't deliver. But I think as like a concept, that was this is probably the bar that they wanted. Like, this is likely still difficult for people, but still attainable. However, now everything is already solved and figured out, right? So there's no more going through and solving. Now everybody's just executing. This late in the fight, I think that's fine. I think they're specifically talking about in the competitive space, going like race for world first. If you had to do this, boss, and for some reason, like let's say they had like there was a particular weak aura that was super helpful for Gallywix, right? Maybe they would like to have seen a world where they don't have the weak aura solving that problem, and they're watching them progress it without having knowledge, but then it becomes a success because they didn't overly solve something. They had a few, natural human mistakes to not quite dialing it in as much, but then you have the execution and the success of the boss being, once they got it down, you could see the culmination of, without any extra stuff, without having, PTR and play experience, this is what our players can do in a set amount of time, even when we're throwing our hardest level of content at them.
Like moving out of a swirly under your feet with only a little bit of time to respond. Like, I don't think it's a coincidence that more and more of our fights have those sorts of just like twitch reaction avoidance mechanics, whereas that used to be one type of fight that we did. The design space is definitely constrained by the knowledge that, if we lean on it too heavily, it's just going to get trivialized.
Some of my favorite WoW raid boss memories are bosses like Mythic Unat, Mythic Anduin. You have to spread out and then you get these marks and you have to go to the right places. And there used to be definitely a library of mechanics like that where you would get them and then you'd have to think and you'd have to have like a system. You'd have to have 20 players sort of coordinate and become one team that does a mechanic like that. And the fact now that add-ons take on much of that job of coordinating us, I think that almost all the Mythic Raiders I know would be delighted to move back to a world where we did that in our brains, right?
Max legit staring daggers in Dragon. Hey, yo, shut the fuck up, man. What would you hey, shut the fuck up. I just love the way that he's looking. I know he's Ian's like, oh dude, did you forget Max is sitting like right there, dude? It's not what's going on in this scene, I know, but it just feels that way.
Move back to a world where we did that in our brains, right? But in Dragonflight we saw a little bit of an attempt.
Max, that couldn't be me. No, it couldn't be me.
To make that happen, right, with the private aura system. And what ended up happening was we still had the weak aura, but now we also have a macro that we need to press, and then the weak aura will assign us the same thing. So I'm a little bit worried about how's the arms.
Yeah, so I'm assuming now. I'm thinking about Firak, right? Is it Firak or Firak? Firak, whatever. A Yggdrasil dragon dude, because I think, especially with the private aura, you know what's funny is like I think it's just now making sense to me. You would get assigned a color, but oh my god, did I just figure out what the fuck a private aura is? You would get assigned a color, but it has to be written in a way that can't be accessed by the API, and it makes it a private aura. So are you going to get red? Are you going to get purple? If it's a public aura, you get red, it sends it to the add-on. Add-on starts telling people, yo, you need to go here. This is the closest one over here. You need to go over there. You need to go right here. You need to adjust right here. Boom. Right? Now the whole thing is solved. Compared to if the private aura had worked, oh crap, I'm standing next to 3 purple people and the nearest red thing is 2 people that way, right? I need to move over, and now those other 3 purples need to go find out where they're going, and we only have a limited amount of time to do that. I think that's fine, but if the fight required such a small window that you couldn't adjust to it, that's why we have add-ons, right? Where is the balance? How much time would you give people to solve that is still mythic level of expectations that isn't add-on requirement level of expectations?
Race between the weak aura devs trying to come up with a new way around the restriction that you're putting in. Is this just
if you're telling me that the private aura was a macro that you would push to send your color to the add-on so the add-on can do it, now I understand why Blizzard was getting pissed off. I made this so you could just figure it out. For this fight, I don't want you to use your calculator, okay? I'm telling you, you don't need to use your calculator. This is a difficult problem, but if you use all the tools that I've given you, you will be able to solve it. You used a calculator on this, didn't you? Okay. Okay. I see where we are now.
further escalation of that?
Hopefully not. I think our goal here is kind of disarmament and definitely not further escalation. I think we understand.
I like how they're talking about it in war terms. Here's the truth. Are you worried about an arms race between add-ons and encounter design? It's already been an arms race. Looking back to it now, the private aura for Firak had to be one of the biggest, right? Like, looking back on hindsight, the designers basically said, here is a problem. Solve it real time. And the players were like, nah. Okay, I'll solve it real time. Solved. Okay. I don't want you to solve it like that, but I did though. So they're already in an arms race, and him saying disarmament, next expansion or 2, before this trilogy wraps up, that DBM stuff is going to be in there. I would also say that because of the system that they're built on, because of the years of work that they're working with and tinkering and blah, 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 they can't do what I saw Fellowship do, which is this stuff is just integrated from the get-go, right? The primitive nature of the party frames in WoW being on the left-hand side of the screen and small and not giving you any information. Why is that? Yes, you can change it, but at this point, the default UI should be stack bars here or stack bars here. When you went into the Fellowship demo, it was immediately just like your 4 players right here in the middle of the screen. Cooldown timers for bosses, right? Stuff was already there. Things like, do you have a number? Like, we used to need to have a number, an add-on to put a number on like your ability cooldowns and stuff like that. You shouldn't have that. That stuff should just now be there. Is the game in a state where until you start making drastic changes, you just can't implement it, right? How would you integrate DBM? Well, part of it's going to be the design encounter, but then you might just need to put fucking warnings in there, which this frustrates me a lot. The game has built-in warnings, and it's not that they're piss poor. You'll get an audio cue, and you'll get a message on your screen, and you'll get some sort of indicator over your character. An add-on will do the same freaking thing, but the add-on's better and tells you more. Sometimes. A lot of times, though, the game does give you the information you need. Maybe not to solve it, but it will at least tell you what the hell is going on.
You know, we're not going to try more little targeted things like that that are going to encourage workarounds, and it just ends up with this.
Private ores didn't work. Okay? We tried. We didn't make them private enough. You guys still found a fucking way around them anyway. So you know what? Fine. Fucking fine. We'll figure out something else. How about we just start taking away the functionality of what you guys have, and we're just going to start setting hard limits on the shit we think you can solve. You start designing from there, you're probably going to have a tier or two that are kind of rough until you flesh it out. But if you put your foot down and you start saying, nah, redesign the Firac fight to where you can't weak aura or private aura or macro the assignments, right? Probably still 100% doable. Probably has the level of difficulty added on because of the removal that the developers wanted, even if it isn't 100% accepted by the player base, right? We had 10 wipes to this, but if like we had an add-on to tell us where to go, you know, we had 10 close calls, and all of those could have been like potential kills, but X person and X person didn't see X person, and we wiped and we died. It's probably still acceptable in Blizzard's playbook. At the competitive level and Race for World First, you can see that no. Nothing short of perfection is acceptable.
This back and forth. Because yeah, if there is a way to solve a complex mechanic, but you have to jump through a couple of more hoops to do so, you'll do that, and then just be more annoyed by the process.
Mm-hmm.
Our goal is to try to get out of that space entirely. And so I think down the line eventually, that may mean, I think, some broader restrictions on specifically what information add-ons have access to.
If you guys are not listening, they are trying to change the way add-ons are implemented in WoW. There will be big upcoming changes. I foresee it. This is corporate read between the line talks / good information drip to give everybody a soft or warm open to change. They are seriously saying, we can't keep up with this, dude. Especially if we don't get these guys hired in-house. If we don't get our own developers that are able to, like, recreate some of this stuff, this has to stop. We can't have you guys sitting there on stream taking 10 minutes and trivializing an encounter, even though it's still difficult, even though it still requires you hit your DPS checks, you hit your HPS checks, your tanks are still plugged in, your coordination is still on fire. But if you are trivializing parts of the fight that are meant to be what the difficulty is, we can't have that anymore. It's done. We're fucking done. We're done. This sounds like 40-year-old gamer saying, all right, dude, no, I'm good. No, we're just not doing that anymore. No, just stop. Just stop. Turn off God mode, dude. I am going into the dev tools and turning off God mode. Just play my game. I'll change some of the ways that I design it. I'll try to make it more fun, but stop. I have 6 parts to a fight, and 3 of them are automated, and you don't even pay attention to them. Then when I make it 9 parts of the fight, and you automate 5, and you're only doing 4, you see me get frustrated again. Nah. Stop taking away my glory of how my fight was supposed to be.
About combat events in real time. At the same time, we know that that's not a thing that we could just do right now.
No, you can't.
Without providing a lot more on our end, both in terms of just UI type functionality, but also looking at how we're designing some encounters, how some of our.
I am gonna be super interested if there is another shift in in rating. And I don't know what that would be, and maybe that's kind of what we're setting up for. But what is the new mythic rating? Right? What is the new version of difficulty that they're trying to achieve that fights aren't solved by add-ons? Right? Man, this is so difficult. I feel like there's gonna be, because doesn't Final Fantasy use like an external tool or something? Like, I thought back in the day you could do something where you could set up like a timer or like an audio recording and just start putting in like vocal cues, but you play it outside of the game, right? So imagine like going into like a voice recorder and then just saying that like, all right, at 1 minute 13 seconds, put in like this call, and like literally playing a 6-minute audio track that syncs up from the time that you pull, that spits out information on the outside telling you pre-move for this, personal this, call this, and whatnot. Still same thing. It's outside of the game, but it could still exist, right? Does DBM go from being in-game to like an out-of-game overlay that reads your stuff like an Overwolf? And just like display stuff so it's not technically interacting? I don't know, man. This is wild.
Classes work. I think
There's still 30 minutes left in this, dude. I've yapped way too much.
Valuable and really important to how players play the game that do rely on that flow of information. Everything from something as simple as damage meters to like, honestly, boss time, like ability timelines, like the DBM style, like when is this next ability going to fire that people have basically been raiding with forever. That's not the like computational weak auras. That's just, hey, this ability is going to happen in 15 seconds. Like, we want to build in our own version of that. Like, I think like down the line, we'd love to see a place where there is a boss timeline as just part of the encounter UI, and that's not something you need an add-on for. And
There's going to be such a radical... I really foresee a huge radical shift in WoW rating. Or at least I foresee them trying to implement a radical shift in WoW rating. There is something huge about to happen to add-ons. And I can't put my finger on it. Part of me feels like they've finally reached a deal with some of these add-on developers to integrate. Because I think that might be one of the only things you can do here is to go to, this is a bad term, but go to your competitors or your enemies in this situation. And it's a terrible analogy. But you need to go across the lines and have negotiations. You need to buy these people out. You need to acquire the knowledge and the tools that they have and just say, you're mainstream in our game. We're okay with that, but we want to change the game itself. And the tool that you're providing won't help that unless we can work with you and develop with you how to redesign our game with the changes that we want. I told you, he whispered, having a damage... Blizzard's going to have a built-in damage meter. That is coming. Out of all the things that they could have done up to this point, the damage meter is one of the first things they could have done. They went with weak aura because I think technically weak aura is a bigger thing, and the cooldown tracker does probably mean more than trying to correctly track DPS right now. But they are 100% about to integrate DBM levels of tools. There's no reason why you couldn't. Hey, you go into a boss fight and there's like a subsection, right? That says boss encounters, encounter timers. And you would just go in there and it can auto select, or you can pull from a drop down if you're outside in like a major city or something. And you can adjust all the things on there. You can see the timers. You can maybe slap up the bar and just say, yeah, for this one, you can have, these 7 abilities being tracked in a little timer. We don't track this one because so-and-so else has already gotten in the habit of like they take care of this whenever it comes out, so they're the one that's tracking it, and they'll call it out because they have some coordinated calls or something like that. That type of stuff is coming. That stuff is coming. Add-ons could largely turn out to be stuff like cosmetic shit and utility stuff. But like the actual interacting with the game, I think they're trying to, because that will restore some of the difficulty, right? Some of the difficulty has been trivialized. Well, they literally keep mentioning, hey, this keeps failing because as soon as we put it in there, you guys grab that data, put it into something that can calculate it, and then you're just spitting out the result over and over again. There's no problem solving going on, right? If you limit that functionality, and you have to, as best as you can with people actually staying within the window of your game, that will add a layer of complexity, and then the adjustment would just be, you know what? We said you have 2.5 seconds to get to this. That's not fair. We're going to give you 3 seconds, all right? Maybe that extra half second was all that people needed, right? They can start wiggling with the reaction time and the windows that you have to get in there compared to, oh, we put it out there, now it isn't anything. So once they finally trivialize that, we've got to make sure they're worried about something else. The game isn't fun, you know, for some people, dealing with 10 freaking things at a time and constant decision making and the overload is like their version of fun, right? I think for me, execution is probably my version of fun. I don't really care if there's like 7 mechanics going on and I can be like, I dealt with it and processed it, whatever. The whole damn thing is usually a dance and a fight, and learning that learning how to choreograph that and coordinate with your team, making adjustments on the fly. Hey, I made a clutch call because, oh shit, someone's going to get this and I need you to have this, and this, or someone's going to get that and you call out, hey, I'm going to go take care of this. You're not on the road. I know. I'll go take care of it. Now you don't have to do it, right? That opens up a part of the fight where now 2 people who were supposed to have done something, now they're free and available, right? Holy crap, you just completely changed the outcome of the fight, and it didn't require you doing an add-on. You just said, we made a game time decision. We decided to problem solve it this way, and it changed how we tackle the fight, and now we were able to open up this cool strat. I think you need to have more room for stuff like that.
That way we can hopefully eventually get to a point where we're really just cutting out the weak aura that solves the mechanic for you, but not the informational stuff that you feel like, it really feels like the game should have been telling you all along, where add-ons are, admittedly, you know, kind of filling in some gaps there.
Okay, so coming in 11.1.7, we're going to have the...
Randomly, I just thought back to when Ian said that they don't design, but no, I don't think that's true at all. I thought I remembered something where it wasn't that they expected that people would use an add-on to solve something, but they, oh, never mind. I'm not going to say it. I have the wrong thought in my head, so just disregard all of that.
rotation helper, those 2 options. What of the rest of this initiative, is any of the rest of this in 11.1.7, or are we just starting the conversation?
I think there's a lot of stuff that we're working on. I think, yeah, we've seen the cooldown manager and then the rotation assist coming. I think down the line, it's some of the stuff that I touched on. I don't have specific patch dates right now, but we are looking at damage meters. We're looking at nameplate improvement.
I think the Wowhead post also states this, if I'm not entirely incorrect. But I think yeah, so I think it was kind of hinted at, but I've mentioned it before. I think if any of these devs played Fellowship or they saw what Fellowship had available on launch, you can have this stuff integrated. You literally can. You can have boss timers. You can have similar things to weak aura. You can have buff and debuff tracking. Stuff that should have been in the game just hasn't been. What are the reasons for that? Don't know. No idea. I'm not John Blizzardman. Okay? I do not know. But if a game comes out and has already built that functionality, if anything, World of Warcraft has such a carved out space right now that if they do or don't do something, it's easy for other games to develop and kind of pull from that, right? If you were making a raiding game right now, other than like Final Fantasy not wanting to have the game be about damage or whatnot, but you could implement a damage meter. It might change the culture of your game, but you can implement a damage meter. The technology is there. Writing the code is probably accessible reasonably enough, right? You can put boss timers in. They're probably hidden in the background anyway. You have to have some way to visually represent them, right? When you don't do these things and you make it so you have to go to outside sources for it, or you make it feel like if you don't know these things are happening, you're behind, and you were in a position to do it, you're really kind of putting yourself behind. And I know I keep going back to Fellowship, but a game came out in a demo that had these things already implemented. You have to catch up. You have to change. And it can't just be... I think they've been talking about add-ons and their functionality, whatever. I'm sure corporate stuff takes a while, but yeah, this is probably a long time coming. WoW should have already had its own damage meter, even if it would have put recount and details and SCADA out of business, right? There's no reason why you couldn't have it integrated. You know your own hooks for your damage and whatnot. You should be able to do that. Things like that should have already been here.
Improvements. We are looking at, like a raid encounter information presentation that shows you timeline of boss abilities coming up. Things in that general space. I think we're looking at all the places where players say right now, you need this week or you need this add-on to be competitive, and asking ourselves, like, how do we change our game to make that not the case? Some of that's going to be add-on functionality, or UI functionality. Other aspects are going to be looking at how we're building some encounters or how some class mechanics work. Like, I think it's super fair to point at some specs, like let's say Outlaw Rogue, who I know are easy one to pick on in some of these ways, and ask, like, how is anyone really supposed to execute this perfectly with the base UI? Almost any time we're tracking like stacks of a buff, and you need to make a decision where it's like, if you're between 4 and 7 stacks, you should do this, otherwise don't. Those are not reasonable tests for us to be posing to our players.
Did I not bring up that example? I brought it up specifically because Mistweaver has a mechanic where when you're in your ramp, you would normally stack up Tiger Palm 4 times, twice if you're in your Jade Fire or your Stomp, to have Blackout Kick hit 4 times. But when you're in your ramp, you hit it once to get 2 just to churn through, and the proc chance is high enough, and what you're getting from the proc secondary, which is leading into like your RSK, is negligible compared to the fact that once you hit one, once you hit the other, it activates the other part of the ramp that's more important, right? I would not know that without looking at Icy Veins and deep diving into Mistweaver ramp. There's nothing that, like, you could do the math in your head, but is that the fun part of like finding out about a class? Because if you're doing that, you're talking about being a theory crafter for your class / learning how to understand it. But initially, that's not going to be where people are looking. Oh man, okay, so this one's going to give me a 22% chance times 2, which is like 40. This is wrong math. Like 44% chance, right? So like that's technically mathematically enough chance to get the proc that I want. But I actually don't need the proc, because when I do that, it actually gives this proc 100% chance to be better. So I just need to get the 44% here to get the 100% here. Like, no one's going through that, right? I'm sorry, the nerds are. We're going through that stuff, right? And not even we. The other nerds that write the shit, and nerds like me are going to read it. It's not intuitive. It's not intuitive. What was that video like a month and a half, 2 months ago, where someone said like there's this add-on that shows you how many, I think Jack said it good today, like how many magnifying glasses are on that ability to make it bigger and better. And it was Renewing Mist for the monk had like 12 different things that interact with it. How the hell are you supposed to manage that on a spell that you largely just... But it's got 12 different freaking knobs with it that can make it better, change the interaction, proc this, change that, change the length of this, interact with this, extend this. Like, how are you supposed to get that information and still have fun and then be in a moment and not feel like, oh man, I forgot to do this and extend this because I forgot about this weird mechanic, right? Me on Resto Shaman, my entire healing has changed because I run a talent called Deluge. It's not Deluge, Deluge. Deluge used to be a joke because I think it was targets in your healing range get 15% more healing. Yeah, well, targets can move out of your healing range all the fucking time. This was before we could move our totem, right? Or before we could move our range with our totem. It's now targets affected by your Riptide and healing rain. I might need to do something and look it up, but the Riptide line blew over my head. When I'm sitting here like, dude, Shaman has terrible throughput sometimes. Like, you look at all these other classes and they're just pushing health bars up. And Shaman, I'm like, hard casting, trying to push. My entire healing layout has changed recently because 15% healing from a target with your Riptide on all of your other heals is insane. But that means when I Riptide a target, if I don't feed a surge into them, or if I Riptide a target that needs a little spot heal, but then someone else takes damage and I send a surge into that person, or if I Riptide one person and I go into an HST drop to pop a chain heal and get my healing stream totem running, that chain heal bounce is missing a bonus from my Riptide. I've had to completely change the way that I play because that small interaction means that every time that I'm sending a heal on someone and I look on my UI and I don't see that Riptide, I feel like I'm doing something wrong. Even if the situation wouldn't allow me the 2 GCDs I need to refresh and put a Riptide on them and then send in the surge. It's just not always possible. But that interaction is still there. It was still so easy to miss. Now I'm trying to constantly make sure I've got almost atonement style, right? Healing or Riptide. Okay, were the 2 targets that I needed? No. All right, maybe so I'll patch this one and spin a Riptide charge here. Oh, I double Riptide it, so I actually had 2 tidal wave charges, so I kind of overwrote those. So I should have probably sent a surge in there. Like, that's what you're dealing with trying to actually master your class. There probably should be something out there that helps or reminds, or you start to trim down because those interactions aren't necessarily needed. It's extra bit of tracking, and a lot of this stuff isn't available to notice in the base UI. You just wouldn't see it. And so you're technically less, if you wonder why you're doing 400 HPS lower than somebody else, well, did you forget to put Riptide on your targets and bounce chain heals off? Okay, well, then you're doing it wrong. Tangents, I'm sorry.
Providing the information to do it correctly. And so we need to either provide the information, simplify the mechanic, or both.
As you should. Again, I think directly to that video that was talking about renewing Mist, and there's so many things that interact with this. Maybe it doesn't need to be that way.
There are a lot of players who love the version of Outlaw Rogue that it has existed over the past few years. So I think there's always some fear when this discussion starts up of, is the answer going to be to simplify everything? And I think it's really exciting to hear instead that the answer is, okay, we'll maybe simplify some of these huge outliers, but we're going to bring in the functionality that makes it so that instead of needing to download a weak aura to solve this, right, instead of needing to have a complicated assistant tell you, now you're supposed to press this button, now you're supposed to press this button, instead we're going to provide that information in a more clear way than looking at the top right of your screen to see your buffs and trying to catch the rotation buff between all the other 20 that are changing in combat.
That's definitely the goal. I think we're, we want World of Warcraft to be as approachable as possible, but we also love that the skill ceiling in the game is as incredibly high as it is. That allows for tons of differentiation and self-expression and accomplishment. But I think, a lot of, at its core, a lot of skill in WoW, I think, boils down to multitasking ability. And like even just, you might be able to do amazing damage just testing it against a target dummy. Very different world when you're also in an encounter where you need to do 3 mechanics at the same time. So, tunnel visioning DPS are a meme for a reason, right? They're just focused on their rotation, and whoops, they just messed up the encounter mechanic, or vice versa. Someone who is good at mechanics, but their DPS goes off a cliff. Really, like the function of a lot of these add-ons is to offload a portion of that computational complexity, and we recognize, like, if we are removing some of that functionality or providing more information, we can probably remove a couple of mechanics, but still keep the same level of challenge. The goal is not to make it easier. The goal is to make it
clearer,
less complex.
Yeah,
and I think
I was gonna say it's not about making it easy. It's about making it clear. Clear of what you're supposed to do, when you're supposed to do it, and not just saying, so the best people in the game can handle problem solving 4 different problems at the same time with 12 degrees of variance and 19 other people. Like, that's not the difficulty.
that's, I think there's a key distinction there, because I think it often can sound like, oh, this is about, this might be about dumbing down the game or simplifying things. It's not that. It's about trying to create a more approachable baseline experience that still has every bit as much room for differentiation.
When you're talking about add-ons that
I really, really foresee. Here's a radical take that I don't think is actually true. I feel like they're gonna be changing the rating landscape here soon. I feel like randomly I thought to myself, they're gonna go down to 10-man rating, right, and make it difficult for 10 people. But the change is going to be, it's a new style of rating that WoW hasn't seen before, in a landscape of add-ons that also hasn't been seen before, to completely change just how much
things have been in the game.
The current scene is right now. I think they want less reliance on that. Like, I just feel like they want to change encounter design, and they're not sure what it's going to look like. But I feel like if there was a tier that came out that was their new design that people were mad about because the mythic version was easy, but it's because things have changed, right? And the difficulty was almost like Gallywix, this tier, where they said the difficulty isn't going to be the fight, right? Oh my god, I forget what Max was Max say? Civilians, right? Max and Jai say civilians, right? I would probably be in that civilian category, like 3K, fucking got my 13s, got my portals, got my AOTC, grinding for myth track gear. Like, you would call me a civilian, right? If there's a world where the accessibility and the difficulty is to the level of what you would say a civilian compared to a mythic first raider, if you're telling me that what they want is for those first 2 weeks, the only people who should be able to viably fight for the boss are world first raiders, and we will design the fight, or we'll design the tier to where it's the difficulty and the new landscape, but it still needs X amount of gear, DPS checks, X coordination, X learning to adjust to the new landscape. But potentially you look at it and say, like, oh, it was as difficult as Gallywix, right? I think they would be fine introducing that and then moving on from there just to get a shift, right? If we get in there and the dungeon journal is something closer to, let's say, like Legion or Kata rating, right? If today there are 15 mechanics in a fight and they go down to 10, right? But 3 of those mechanics that would usually be handled by a weak aura now can't, that could be the level of difficulty that they're talking about, right? You've got 10 things you got to worry about this entire fight, but we gave you the information. This can't be hard solved with this. You have to react with in enough time here. It could be like almost like a slower type of progression that maybe still gets completed by the top end people in a time that and in a manner that they feel like, it wasn't really that challenging for us. Like, yeah, we still have to work for it, but like, it wasn't X difficult in boss levels of difficulty, right? It wasn't Ansarek, pre-nerf and all that stuff. If they could get to there, I think that's what Blizzard is looking for. And I think people would actually be okay with it. You couple that with something like, if you make changes like this and then you do something drastic, like Mythic can be done in 10 man, right? Not even 15. Go down to 10 man, right? Maybe you can flex to 15, but go down to 10 man and we implement these changes. Now we redesign completely the entire design space of our rating. Now you can at least give raiders a chance. Now you can give yourself as developers a chance to work on like a bit of a reset playing field and actually start designing the fights the way that you want. Because it really sounds like they've been kind of handcuffed, worried that, well, if I don't put 15 things in here, you're just going to auto solve 7 of them. And so my fight is just a 2 expansion older fight with like new updated graphics and mechanics and challenges, right? It's just this much is solved, this much, this old version was pretty much the exact same way, and now I can't get any more difficult than this, because every time I think of, like, imagine being in there, like, it's one thing to solve a problem, imagine being able to create the problem. How much thinking has to go into that? You can solve a puzzle. How hard is it to create an actual puzzle that's engaging? How hard is it to create a math problem? And I mean that genuinely. Like, if you were a teacher, if you were a writer for a college course book, who creates the problems, right? Who creates a problem that you need to solve that touches all the mechanics of the new theory or the new thing that you want to solve and still gives an answer that is, we'll say, like, exciting, right? There's probably not a lot of mention put into stuff like that. If you have to create the problem, that is a level of difficulty in itself. Then you become worried about, oh my God, how are people going to trivialize my problem? How can I create a new problem? If you've got 100 raid mechanics out there to choose from, number one, between 1 and 100, there's got to be something that's the same. How do you differentiate between here? Which is one thing. But then what if what you're trying to make out of 100 is 101? And 101's never been done before. 101's never been seen before. How much thought do you have to put in to create a problem that nobody's seen before while still understanding what solutions are out there, which one you want to be the one to solve it, which one you feel will be found and used as the most optimal, because we are talking about competitive space, so optimization is the most important thing. That has to be nerve-wracking. And those guys probably need a chance to say, can we reset this? Can I maybe grab a mechanic? Like, do dragons even have tail swipes anymore? The answer is probably no. That might be one of the mechanics that Ian's talking about, because you just don't stand behind the dragon. And if the dragon doesn't move and you aren't forced to move, then there's no worry about you walking by the dragon's tail. But we all know that breath, swipes, and tails and roars are all part of dragon mechanics, right? How would you invent a new dragon mechanic? How would you, or would you rather, we haven't done a tail swipe in a while, but I'd like to put a tail swipe in there and maybe sprinkle on like 2 or 3 things that are happening that will force you to potentially be near the tail and trigger it. And either it be necessary to do like an interaction with something, or it's just, I want to have this be the check to make sure that these are the mechanics that are going on and that you're also being mindful of this. These guys got their hands full.
Games and inspired by it. You mentioned a damage meter.
Yeah.
So I'm really interested in just what your view is philosophy-wise about damage meters in games like this.
That's a great question, and I think Ultimately, we have to be guided by what our community prefers and what we see them doing today. The single most popular add-on used across the entire game is a damage meter by like a fair margin.
Okay.
The majority of
Doesn't surprise me. I don't even know. We're such weird space orc people. We're so weird. It shouldn't matter, but it does. Damage meters, they shouldn't matter, but I don't. What landscape can we go to where it doesn't actually matter? I don't know. I don't know. I have nothing to say. I have nothing. I have no constructive anything. You can just actually disregard everything I said. This is tough.
players, the large majority of players, have a damage meter add-on installed.
Mm-hmm.
And so that indicates that people want to see that information at least about themselves.
Mm-hmm.
We definitely want more nuanced measures of success and understanding, like how successful were you or how much did you contribute on this run, highlighting things like interrupts, highlighting things like avoidable damage to give a fuller picture of performance.
That window's going to get closed so fast. Big damage, best player, GG. That in-screen window gets closed so fast. I just had a run yesterday. I was the second most on interrupts behind the prop paladin. We had an arcane mage. We had something else like a hunter. And then we had a unholy DK. And yes, I'm sure you're going to say Shaman has a 12-second interrupt. The fastest and shortest in the game. I didn't have a ton of interrupts, but I had more than double, almost triple the DK. Probably doesn't count things like grips, interrupting a spell, slappy hands, yanking something when there was a critical cast going off. Probably doesn't cover that. But he had 3. And here's the thing. I don't think he cared. He did damage. He was there to do damage. He doesn't interrupt. He just doesn't care. Damage is all that mattered. He was the best player, hands down. Didn't matter. Getting people to care about the minutia and the nuance of stuff, there's a very small subset of people who will take in all details. I love us. I do. But I'm sorry, most of us humans only give a fuck about ourselves and how much we are better than the next person and how much I can take that into my next e-girl conversation, or I can take that to the bar and brag to my friends that I did more damage than anybody else and that it was only me. If people right now, I got talked down in my guild last season because somebody showed up, did more healing than me on a couple of pulls of Ansarek, and I was told that you're only mad because they're not healing the way that you want to. They're healing more than you. Now, what I was mad about on that particular fight was the debuff that Queen Ansarek gives your tank. We needed single target healers to get that off, and none of my single target healers were getting the debuff off. I, as a shaman, changed my spec and ran different talents than you normally would in that group just to give myself instant heals to churn through every other tank debuff because the other people weren't doing it. I went into the logs and said, the debuff is on the tank. Your heals went to the raid. The tank is the most important person to heal right now because they have a 25 million HP absorb shield that can overlap into the next tank swap. I don't give a shit that you just bursted for 3 mil HPS on the raid. The fucking tank still has the debuff, and you look at the logs, the only person direct healing them, the person who shouldn't be doing it. Raid leader, in no short words, is saying, hey, you're just mad because you're not at the top of the meters right now. He's healing better than you. There was no attention paid to this particular mechanic needs to be managed in this way, and it would be easier if we had these people whose toolkits are designed for it, even if it required a spec change. that they are the better people to take care of it, you know what? Fuck it, I'll do it. Are there going to be guilds that would look at that log, see my lower HPS, and say, hey, we understand what you did? Or on the surface, are they going to say, you're like the 4th best healer in a 4 healer raid. Like, why would we take you to our comp? You do like 1.2 mil HPS overall. Like, you're terrible. Like, we don't want you. That's parse culture. That's the what we live in. I don't think having all this you can have all this extra stuff. So many people are going to scoff at that. That person that you show, dude, you may have done like the most DPS, but you had like 7 deaths to like avoidable damage and no interrupts. Or even running an interrupt and you're saying, yeah, but I did most damage though. / leave party. 100%. Guarantee that's what's going to happen.
But at the end of the day, I think for someone who's trying a new spec, trying a new talent build, getting a new trinket, and they want to see like how did this affect my performance compared to the last run?
Mm-hmm.
That's an important piece of information.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think we know that in any world where we were going to limit some of the ability of add-ons to like
perceived improvements hold nothing compared to actual tangible fucking evidence, and that's just facts. You can feel like you're doing really, really good. I can feel like I'm doing really, really good with announcing right now. But the fact is, I'm announcing for 1 pro team and 2 or 3 high schools. The perception on the outside is, but the tangible thing that I would say is I'm still learning. I'm still trying to go through the muck and climb up to where I can even be viewed as a possible candidate for some of these higher level jobs, right? How you perceive, I got a trinket and it feels like I'm doing more damage compared to, oh, I got a trinket and I'm looking at my run and it's comparable to the last one and I saw 3% damage increase. That's huge, right? That trinket, you can see what that trinket actually did for you. That's what people want to see. It's kind of necessary.
Like, again, do that real-time combat event tracking. We would need to provide a damage meter solution of our own.
Mm-hmm.
I think one of the exciting things is I think if we're doing that on our end, we can also have it be server authoritative, so you're not worried about like who's in a different combat phase, who's out of range, or whatever. Yeah. It could just be like, this is official and going to be accurate all the time.
I do believe that, especially early on, that like, I want to say details and damage meters and whatnot really relied on other people having it because it was an aggregate of the data, right? Because it's the same thing. If you can only track what's going on within 40, 60 yards of yourself, but someone is 75 away doing something else, or if you get portaled down to the bottom, right? I feel like back in the day, you needed all of those logs to push it in there and then kind of average what everybody saw, fill in the blanks of who had the information here, who had the information here. It's probably better now, but this would make sense that, yeah, we're literally seeing the numbers are coming out from our side anyway. We can just take those and just say, all right, we'll just throw it in a damage meter, and now this is about as accurate as it can be, regardless if you turn it on or not.
We were obviously mostly thinking about Mythic Raid when our brains go to how this is going to affect things.
Mm-hmm.
The overwhelming majority of players are in heroic raids, normal raids, raid finder raids, doing Mythic Plus dungeons, right? When we're talking about making these changes to what weakors can do, is there an appetite for changing how heroic and normal raids function as well? Like, do we see these problems?
I'm going to say no, because the reality is, when you step back and look, normal and heroic can be completed without coordination. And specifically, properly coordinating things like damage reduction and healing cooldowns. Even coordinating like your burst moments. Those 2 versions are so much, hey, jump in and get it done, that if anything, it's more busy work. And it's really more so dependent on the competency of the players you're playing with. Heroic can be slapped day 1. Normal and heroic can be slapped day 1. Even if it's difficult, even if the damage numbers are tight, right? Add-ons and whatnot would largely be unaffected for stuff like this because usually the timing windows and the difficulty are really not. The only thing I think would be like OAB, it doesn't matter what version of OAB you're playing, like you could still argue, oh, you know, people would still run the weak order to know what order is the most optimal or what order they're going to particularly do. There hasn't Mechatork. Desire Lore is probably one of my favorite raid instances. Mechatork. I didn't need an add-on. I literally told my raid, okay, so here's what's going to happen. If you don't unmute your mic, you're not playing in this game. I don't care if your mic sounds like trash. You're not going to play in this game. I know that there are add-ons that will put markers above you or whatever, but this is how we are going to handle the fight. Clear lines of communication. Once the tanks and the DPS understand what's going on in the fight, the only people who need to talk are the people who get in the bots. When you get in the bots, we're going to have a very clear method of solving this problem. And this is literally, this is mine. I think I have the VOD somewhere. At some point, I'll probably upload some of my old school rating VODs. But I genuinely told them, when you're there, you go, you get in a bot. Voice clears. Only the 3 people in the bot get to talk. Tank has prio. Always call out tank's symbols first. There was leading questions and verbiage that I developed for my team that we used. I would get in, because I was playing tank. So I'd get in, I'd say I'm in a bot, I'd pick one person, and they would be my partner for the run. And I would say, Tess, you're yellow. Tess, you're blue. Tess, you're green. What am I? You're red. What am I? You're blue. What am I? You're green. Pop out in 3, 2, 1, go. Now there's an extra layer in there because there were 3 people in the bots, but you can see that effective line of communication. Voice is clear. Tanks are dealing with their overlaps because we knew our particular roles in that downtime where the other tank was going to be in there. We knew our overlaps. We had our own special taunt swap that did not go with DBM, right? You can develop this stuff in normal and heroic raids, and there's more than enough room for you to basically fucking YOLO. If you have baller players or you have people who can just react to the way that you're leading, you can cruise control through normal and heroic. I don't think add-ons are nearly... There's so many different difficult fight changes between heroic heroic and mythic most of the time that's what starts to facilitate the need for add-ons, right? That's when you need to, hey, we got the extra mechanic, now that's overlap. So now we've got 2 different overlaps plus variations of overlaps, plus they can happen at different times, but this might show that this one's going to happen, this might show that this one's going to happen, on top of all the randomness of the other fight. I don't really think that normal and heroic raids would be affected by this sweeping change, largely because those fights are going to get redesigned anyway. Those fights are going to get redesigned with the idea in mind that we're starting to move away from a reliance on add-ons. So some of the newer normal and heroic raids will probably just feel like that, right? Maybe a little bit slower, not as much going on, maybe kind of clearly defining stuff, maybe considered a little bit easier to digest, which I think is fine for normal and heroic raiders, right? If heroic got easy to get AOTC, who cares? Who fucking cares? Doesn't matter.
In there as well for what add-ons can do and how they solve things?
Absolutely. I mean, I think it all trickles down, right? I mean, I think maybe even more, a larger percentage of players doing Mythic Raid might use specific weak aura packs than, let's say, normal. But those add-ons are used by the majority of players right now, and certainly other, boss mods are as well. And I think a lot of it just
kind of
comes down
underestimating
to,
the fact that
what
people are
the
already
business
using stuff
that we're presenting.
Mm-hmm.
If there's something that everyone is relying on a tool right now to assist with, we would have to change it to still keep it the same.
Man, the reliance on a tool is... I wish they would just say it what it is, and when the community feels the problem is solved, there's no desire to do anything else other than just use that, which causes it to feel like it's necessary. I would once again agree with Max and say, yeah, even if it's installed, how many of you are actually paying attention to it? because the way that it can be installed, but the way that you're using it and the way that you're reacting and interacting with it determine how it's actually. If you just have something screaming off in your head, but 3 pulls in a row, you're like, oh, dude, yeah, I didn't hear my add-on. I wasn't paying attention. You're not. It's not fucking helping you. It's not helping you. Oh yeah, I had another ability go off at the same time. Okay, you're not problem solving. You're just like, oh, my add-on didn't tell me what to do. That's on the community. That's on the majority of the player base. That's also probably just straight up honest, in that most people likely aren't putting in the work and just want to fucking play the game. All right. And they're just different people out there. Some people don't mind putting in that extra little bit of effort to figure out how something's supposed to work, and finding reverie in that aha moment. Some cats are just like, nah, they said you're supposed to use this, supposed to tell me what to do. Why didn't it work? Those people exist.
Same level of challenging, but without that same automation assistance. And that can take many forms. It can be there's 1 or 2 fewer things to soak. You have an extra couple of seconds to actually.
Didn't I say what this is going to lead to? A bit of a slower version of WoW. I'm telling you, 2-3 years before the faction stuff, I was screaming at Blizzard. I was on a low pop alliance server saying, y'all got to get rid of these factions, man. This is so dumb. These servers and these factions got to go. I said in raid at some point, a server will just be where your character lives at some point. And that's what it is now. I'm going to make a call. Mythic's going to drop down in rating size very soon. And there's going to be a couple upcoming tiers that are going to see a drastic shift in raid design philosophy and the integration of add-ons with that, which in itself is going to change the raiding landscape. You have to pay attention to what they're saying here. If they can actually follow through with what they're looking to do, there is no way that the next few steps aren't a change to Mythic rating, to the accessibility for people, which would, number 1, be size. If they go the lockout way, and they don't go size, I will actually be disappointed. They should do both. Mythic lockout should be per boss. It's old. It's done now. Stop worrying about gatekeeping Mythic gear. The people at the top, there's not enough to warrant not letting everybody just get the damn gear and play the game. If you can log into frickin' Diablo 3 and grind that game solo and get all the pieces that you need, there's no reason. There's no reason. And you don't have to do it on the hardest level. You can do it on a low level and you'll still have a lower chance to run into it. But you have also the opportunity to progress and grow and try those other levels to get to the point where you're grabbing it like everyone else. But the accessibility is that you only need yourself. You only need yourself. We have to move away in World of Warcraft. There's no reason why most people shouldn't be able to get some of the best gear, because the reality is, even if you have it, do you have the team? Do you have the skill? Do you have the interest? Do you have the time? There's so many other factors that it can't just be like, oh my God, numbers and retention and whatever. People are playing your game. Let them play your game. Let them get that. Let there be a way for the people at the very top to get it as fast as they can, right? And let everyone else at least have a reasonable glimmer of hope. And if it's the top 3% of the people that are worried about, hey, these people shouldn't get the gear that I have access to, I'm sorry, it's 3%. It's 3%. For me personally right now, I have access to almost everything at like 2 to 3 weeks slower than someone who's absolute hard sweat grinding for it. I'm still getting it way faster than a majority of the other people out there. Keep doing that. Make it accessible. You don't have to necessarily make it easy. You gotta grind. You gotta grind. But don't just keep gate holding or gatekeeping the stuff from people. Let them get in there, give them more accessibility, lower the barrier to entry to Mythic rating so people can experience it. I can't experience it this season. So I have to go all the other methods that I can. I should still have at least I feel like, even if it requires work, I should still have the option to get some of these in-game pieces, because the reality is, like, what am I changing by getting it? I still got to learn how to play my class. I still got to get access to the stuff. I still got to show up. I still got to kill the boss. I still got to work with the other people that I'm going to work with. Nothing is just, this isn't D3. where it's just once I can figure it out for myself, I'm good. There's always other stuff that you have to integrate here. WoW's raiding landscape is about to change. Add-on functionality, the game itself, what's already integrated into the game, the information, like they are, if you are listening and they have the option to, they are about to change raiding.
Spread out on the fly. You know, it's a pretty common mechanic of like, all right, 3 people get a debuff, and they just have to like run out in different directions from each other. People have been just kind of playing the game and doing.
And I think that's kind of what they want, because you'll have a debuff like that. It'll be like, oh, 3 people go run out, and the add-on will go, hey, you go left, you go right, give me. Fucking why? Fucking why? Literally on the fly. Watch one person go one way. Watch another person go another way. You commit to going another way. Give enough time to where if 2 people go the same way, maybe don't give them enough time to go, okay, went to the right spot, right? You get this, both going the same way, and you have enough time still for you to go, oh shit, and not, oh god, we both went, oh god, we need to go. That should cause a fail of the mechanic. But you should be able to go, oh shit, okay, I got you, boom.
Doing those for years and years, but of course, if you can like, if the time you're given to react is so tight that you can't afford to do that, then people do gravitate towards, all right, we're going to put diamond, circle, and triangle on the ground. Everyone's going to get an auto-assigned marker, and you just know, like, I'm going to run to my marker to guarantee that it's executed correctly. I think it's a bit more interesting if we give you a couple of seconds so that you can look around and make.
They've been designing raid encounters, expecting raiders to be robots. That's what I feel Elon is saying. We've had to. So this is what I wanted to talk about earlier, where he was saying that like we don't design around add-on functionality. I think there's a little bit of facetiousness, and like he's being a little facetious, because he's telling you right now there were mechanics that we don't do anymore because we know the add-on's going to do it. It's what he said. I believe I can go back, but what he said is we don't design encounters expecting that the add-on will solve it. Right? Oh, we did this, the add-on's going to take care of it. No. They don't design like that. They have had to change how they design because some of the mechanics that they implement, they can already perceive that they will be solved with an add-on. Case in point, 3 people get something, 3 people need to go soak. It's one thing to put down markers of where the soak needs to go. It's another thing for the add-on to assign markers on those people and that lead them to where they need to go. It's another thing for it to assign their positions and take out your mental processing of it. And what has happened, as he's saying, if you hear him, it's one of the things that I brought up earlier. I feel like they're going to give you more time. If they expected you to be able to problem solve it in 2.5 seconds, that's a result of the current landscape of how hard it's been to provide difficulty to competitive raiders on a mechanic that can be solved in a trivial manner. Right? They want to give you a 3-person soak and say that you've got 4 seconds. And in their eyes, it's should be difficult for most people. The top end people will probably go, I've had 4 seconds to like respond to this. Like I could have done it in 1.5, right? It's another thing when you're designing and you're saying, if I give you 4 seconds, the 2.5 that I expect for you guys to have a quick open line of communication to sort people out, that's gone. And you can do it in 1.5 seconds. Well, I can't give you 4 seconds because it's trivial and this is mythic. I've got to give you 2.5. Now you get 1 second of processing power. 1 second of processing power, you know what that sounds like? A fucking computer and a robot, aka an add-on. Because now we as humans can't think that fast, can't process that fast. But if I can push a button or the information can get piped into somewhere and get thrown back out to me, I don't have to think about it. We're not running into human processing speed, we're running into the speed of an add-on. You've had to change your design encounter because that add-on will eventually take away the part that you want to be challenging. So I think he's being a little bit facetious. Are they designing it expecting that the add-on will take care of it? No. Have they had to change their design philosophies because a 4-second window to respawn can get trivialized to a 1.5-second response time? And now you have to shorten that because if you give them the 4, they're just abusing the extra 2.5. There's no challenge. There is no challenge in that mechanic. The challenge now has to be, how fast can you do it in processing go right now? Blah, blah, blah. That's not fair and fun. There's going to be a landscape change where I'm telling you, raiding is going to feel slower. You're going to feel like you have more reaction time. And I'm starting to, even though I don't play Mythic, I think that it's going to be a situation where it's going to be hard for me not to, because stuff is going to be difficult, but it's going to make so much sense, and you're going to have time to prog and learn and not be worried about it's how fast you can react. It's kind of like Mythic Plus. I have genuinely like a 1 point something cast time on one of my heals, my major heal. And there are times where it feels like I had 4 seconds to react, maybe less. That's 2 GCDs and a thought process to be able to decipher what's going on top of XYZ else going on. That's not really fun for me. You died because I had 1.5 seconds that I need to dedicate to you, and you died in 1.3. I'm sorry, I'm not a robot. I'm so sorry. It was possible, but I should have reacted faster. I should have seen it sooner. I should have known that it was going to happen. I should have had an add-on that was telling me you were getting targeted and precast on you to know that you were going to take the damage and make sure the heal lands at the exact same time before you do it and you don't die. That's not fun. If you're telling me we could go in and almost have like for these guys, like a Gallywix level of experience where like we didn't have all the information, but like we took 2 weeks and we figured out the fight and our own strat for ourselves. We, had a couple add-on timers that like we adjusted for our particular group, for our particular strat. And then we, killed the boss, but that third week of progress was like, it was a little bit slower, or the overall fight was, nothing felt unfair, right? Maybe you do have an extra half second or a second, but maybe that's a result of we've been playing the fight so much and gotten so used to everything that now our optimization has just improved. And it wasn't because of an add-on, it's because we've seen the fight 30 times. And on pools 31 through 40, everyone started to click. Everyone realized a little pre-move here, a little extra move here. And now that 4-second window that they gave us that is a respectable amount of time, we are the ones who optimized it. I think that's what they want.
Make sure you're not running in the same direction and then do the exact same thing. I mean, at the end of the day,
I'm sure if I had done what I thought when I first started and just let this play out for 43 minutes, we wouldn't be here for 3 hours talking about this. It's also more fun. But I love how I keep saying something and thinking of the idea of where they're going, and it's 100%, like it's the next comment that he's going to make, right? I really feel like time to react is going to be the number one thing that is going to change. It's not the amount of mechanics. It's not. Though I do think there will be some adjustment in that, right? If mechanics, if there are 15 mechanics to a fight and that's just default right now, I could see that going down to like, let's say between like 8 and 12, right? A simple fight might have 8 and the other one might have 12, which is still probably quite a bit. In the grand scheme of things, a lot of the times you're kind of just, that could be tank busters. That could be a healing check. That could be a group soak. That could be an AoE pulse damage. That could be like 8 mechanics isn't actually that bad. It actually isn't, right? So if you were starting to change from not necessarily beginning boss to end boss, but difficult fights for us tend to have a little bit more than 8 to 10 mechanics. And simpler, straightforward fights are, maybe like less than 10, 8, maybe if you're lucky, it's like a 6 or 7, but you're talking about like a straight patchwork, loot pinata, first boss, right? And on top of that, during the fight encounter, something happens. Now you have time to react. Something happens. Problem solve. Wait, damage, next solve, right? Not that it would be that slow, but if you can slow the game down and now give more people time, right? You don't have the thing that's going to auto tell you, so we're going to give you enough time to actually get over there. And you play it safe early. I'd much rather have them have a mythic tier where the mythic raiders are like bitching that it's Gallywix levels the entire time. Because like, yeah, it was difficult, but it wasn't tuned hard enough. Right. But did the landscape change in a way that you can foresee a new style of raiding? Right? It might be easier for the top 1%, but would the top 1% be okay with letting another 9% in there to actually see and participate, right? To actually let people learn to get up to that level and keep improving the people at the top.
Raiding in particular, but group PvE, group PvP too. Like in an MMO, a huge portion of, I think, the fun of it is just coordination, communication, feeling like everyone's working together to overcome some challenge in front of them. And I think getting back into a space where there's room for more of that organic collaboration as opposed to it just being like regimented and solved by an external tool, I think like will open up a lot of design avenues for the game going forward.
Throughout the last couple years, especially in Mythic Plus, that had been ramping in complexity. You've seen, and actually even if you can go back, like you can see the amount of things that people have in their UI to help them know that something's happening. So like back in Power Auras, it was, there was just some giant some giant face on your screen would pop up, and that meant that something procced. And then it's gotten more refined. And now even in the last, it's been ramping the past couple years, you see like you listen to someone's POV who's doing High Mythic Plus right now, you're going to hear AoE, dodge, frontal, circle. Like, it's just every bit of audio aid they've used to it's in the idea of being optimal, it's not required. And especially this patch, I think Mythic Plus complexity has actually gone down as an intentional design point, it seems at least. I think you might have made a post about that. So that stuff is less required, but people have like kind of already baked that in the UI. Is that something?
From what Max said, this would 100% coincide with how they redesigned Mythic Plus a little bit.
Have that in the game, or is that something you don't want to have happen, where it's more like you're organically doing mechanics because you see them, or are you okay with all of the audio and visual aids that exist currently within add-ons?
I think the answer is mixed there. I think like audio prompts are something that are super valuable to people. That's something we want to continue to add support for on our end as well. Like we know we got feedback we've gotten around the 11.1.5 cooldown manager would be that many people would appreciate being able to have audio prompts tied to certain things or procs firing, and that's something they would miss about weak auras. We want to make sure that we're offering that kind of thing as well. Beyond that, I think a lot of what we've seen is frankly us not doing a sufficiently good job of telegraphing the importance of certain mechanics and their impact, and players needing to come up with solutions for them.
Yeah. It's probably something closer to, it's like how they redesigned their swirlies for this pack. With how many years we've been in the game, you needed to have something. The difficulty couldn't be that you couldn't see them and that there was stuff going on. The difficulty needs to be getting out of it. The difficulty needs to be adjusting and taking the penalty to your damage for being in the middle of a cast. That's where it should be. It kind of screams like Final Fantasy and Guild Wars 2 that like you need to have better indicators, right? I'm thinking of the flamethrower on Operation Floodgate. The frontal visual that it gives you is pretty fair. But if it was just a damn thing on the ground that like pulsed and waved a few times, it'd be so much easier. Like you have to graphically, visually notice that you can be outside of the range of the flamethrower, right? The graphic for it is like a pulsing red wave, but at least on my computer, I can mostly see it. It's very similar to like the two-way spitter in Theater of Pain, right? If you would just put big old fucking indicators on the ground, and then like the visual itself wasn't like some cool version that like gets lost in the environment, it'd be much easier to tell. The game is slowly starting to make a transition into actually properly telling you what's going to happen, when it's going to happen, and then kind of stopping there and say, okay, now you solve.
Externally. Ideally, there's a concept we call affordance, which is basically just how well is something telegraphed? How intuitive is it with visual presentation? And ideally, the affordance of a mechanic should match its impact. And sometimes, if you have a random mob in a dungeon pack that has a frontal that will just delete you if you're not getting out of the way of it, and it's just one thing going on among a half dozen other things, why? And why? Like, how could we call that out better with visuals, with a longer cast time, with how we're creating the pack in the first place?
Yeah, like, so going back to like the shredders in Operation Floodgate, the shredations should absolutely put a reticle that follows your character so you know what direction and where it's going to place. It shouldn't take you doing the fight and pulling that mob like 4 or 5 different times, which like I guess is part of learning. But if for shredation, if the first thing you saw when you got that was a box, a rectangular box that's going to be the width, including the random direction, because it's random what direction it's going to face, that particular mechanic. If you were to have your player model and then put a rectangular thing around it, that alone during the shredation cache would have told you everything you needed to know. There's a box on me. I can't get away from it. Boom, it slams on the ground. Oh, snap. Okay. That would be a visual indicator that I think that mob should have had from the get-go, right? You can have the flamethrower, I'm pulsing flames and this is where I'm going to be. But if you just slapped an indicator on the ground that also pulses with it, so you can see, oh crap, not just, I think right here and it ends right here. No, the animation ends right here. I'm going to put myself right here. We're good. The stuff needs to be displayed more, just 2 or 3 steps short of a solve.
And that's just one example of one of the areas in which we know we can do better. Something else we've talked about on the UI front is we would want the ability to, on our end, flag mobcasts in Mythic Plus as like lethal, as like this should be a high priority interrupt, because we know players are going to basically.
Talking about Theater of Pain, the jumpers in the Plague Wing, the Decaying Filth is effectively a bolt. You don't know that. Cinderbrew Meadery. I think one of the abilities is called Free Samples. That's a bolt cast. You don't know. Most bolt casts, once you get up past like level 12 in a key, lethal. Damn near lethal. Also don't see who they're targeting on, because it targets a random person. There's something right there. A bolt is going to cast on somebody, and you need a UI to tell you, or you need an add-on to tell you that either you're the target or who the target is so you can heal them. We moved away from, hey, it's going to the main tank target. Well, I think that's poor design philosophy now. Like, and maybe this is something Ian is talking about. Back in the day, those bolts and everything, they're going into your tank, right? Very rarely are you getting this random cast shadow bolt or whatever that you need to kick because some random person that doesn't have threat is. And then I would say, what is the fucking point of threat when you do something like that? You can't, right? You need to have something in there that says, hey, yeah, in the sea of 7 mobs, this mob and this mob are both targeting the same person. And if that hits them and you don't stop it, that person is cucked. You've got to have something in your UI that tells you that. Or you need to redesign your fight so that, you know what? Bolt casts aren't random anymore. Or when you get a bolt cast, there's an audio. Bolt incoming. This is why people would feel like they need an add-on. I guess now I'm kind of walking back in my statement I said earlier. But I guess stuff like that is why you would feel you would need an add-on. Because you get to a 13 or 14, 15, 16, 17, and you do an AoE stop, and you don't have anything left. Those bolts are going to random people, but those random people could just be one random person, and that person's done. They're just straight done. You don't have a wall. You don't have a kick. You don't have an interrupt or a stop. You're done. You're just done. definitely shouldn't be that way. And I think that's more of a result of how they designed that. That's probably a poorly designed mechanic and should be revisited. Random bolts aren't fun for anybody. Or they need to be a lower lethality. Or what he's saying, we should probably tell you the bolt's going to kill you. I think that's fair. How much of this is like, on one end, people thinking like, that's not fair, I shouldn't tell them all that. Another one, people are going like, come on, dude. It doesn't change the difficulty. I still have to kick it. I still have to interrupt it. At least now I know. Yeah, 3 of them targeted me. Hey guys, we've got 3 seconds to kick this cast, and one of them is lethal. Solve it.
Look to solve that anyway. If there are 3 casters in a pack, and 2 of them, it's actually kind of okay to let them free cast, but one of them, if they ever get a cast off, you're probably going to wipe. They shouldn't all just look indistinguishable on your screen.
I swear to God, I keep pausing it in front of Ian, and he just says the same thing I yap about. I keep pausing it in front of him, and it's the same thing. In Theater of Pain, there's no reason why interruptible cast Withering Discharge, or interruptible cast Decaying Filth, interruptible cast Decaying Filth, interruptible cast Withering Discharge, fucking lethal! Fucking goes off your party's fucked! Nothing on there. You have to be told when you go in there, we are kicking this cast. This one matters. The other one doesn't matter. I think there's design issues on both of there. Make the cast just matter. Give them another ability that doesn't have anything to do with it, but don't put 2 kickables on there and be like, well, I guess you got to figure out which one's the most important one.
And us expect you to figure that out.
They did that in season 1, right? Wasn't there like a couple casts or like super giga you die death volley or something?
Yeah.
And they had this big animation.
Our Kara casters where they hunker down, there's green glowy stuff around them, and they're casting a volley, and you're like, all right, I gotta kick
You'd
that.
be playing WoW for 2 days. And
Yeah.
Ah, that is kind of cool. If that is something that happened, I never noticed it. And I would say that this is cute. I think this is cute. Here's where the fuck my eyes are. Okay? We wouldn't be this zoom close in. So you're talking about this visual being on this much space while I'm watching all of this. Yeah, this is cute. This is your nameplate. Because you would have add-ons that will make the nameplate light up. Danger. Something. Someone has predetermined that this is bad and you need to be told this is happening. This is cute. But this is almost the type of solutions they've been doing where like, okay, we'll put something in game for you to notice. I'm sorry, there's too much going on my fucking screen for me to know. And I would say that sometimes. A lot of times you probably will pick up on this, but I would say that this is something that I'm just now being made aware of this because someone mentioned it. I've never picked up on this. I've known that if something says volley, Jesus Christ, we kick that, right? I'm just trained to, there's a cast, this is what the cast is going to do, this is the lethality of the class. Bone Spears. Bone Spears, what is it? It's going to kill you. It's going to kill you. That's all we know about Bone Spear. It will kill you. It's not named a bolt. It's not named a volley. It's just a spell that once you learn it, I will die. Heard. Understandable. Yeah. Even if they do this, Dreddy, Dr. Atnos, I never noticed or cared.
And you're like, that can't happen. That can't happen, yeah.
But I'm looking forward to an M+ then where if I can't have, if we're talking about maybe taking away my ability to air horn myself on a certain cast, something like that, if instead I have to be now looking at a mob and there is a sort of a visual language that I can come to expect, like if the mob is hunkering down and it's got particle effects around it, that means I gotta kick it. I think that would be more fun for everybody as well, rather than...
That would actually be kind of cool. So like I could imagine a world, think about this. Okay. Top. Those mobs at some point, I don't even know what it is, but like they'll glow green, and either they like have a shield or a buff. I don't know what it is, but imagine if let's keep the same Withering Discharge and Decaying Filth on there, right? Decaying Filth goes off, and they just do like a regular cast animation. But if you said that Withering Discharge was going to go off, and now there's like AoE waves that are like woo, 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 boom, right? It gives you 5 waves. It's not going to be 5 seconds, but like all of a sudden you're sitting there, you're looking at a character model, and in the sea of shit, you start seeing ripple past your face. Ripple past your face. Ah, fuck. Discharge is going to go off. Discharge is going to go off. Can't let that happen. I'm fucking for that. That's kind of cool.
Than having the air horns be the solution.
Definitely.
That is entirely our hope, right? I think, and just to be super clear, I think we see the taking away part, the restricting functionality, as the end of this long road. I think we know, we want to make it very clear, we're not sitting here being like, all right, we want you to play the game the way we intended, and we're going to take away your tools. We just want to bridge that gap. And we have a lot of work to do on our end to keep building up more improvements, more functionality. And it's not just the UI. The VFX changes that you mentioned are a part of that overall effort of us asking, what are the places where players feel like they need add-ons to succeed? Why is that the case? And when it's like, it's not clear when you're standing in something, and so I need, GTFO or some other, sound effect to let me know that I'm standing in something lethal, it should be obvious. Let's fix that on our end. And we know we want to keep chipping away at those things, and hopefully eventually get to a point where really the only difference between what we are offering and what powerful add-ons can do is that small subset of like computational problem-solving stuff, at which point we can move forward.
So throughout the evolution of Private Order,
I'm telling you guys. I'm telling you. If I could guess, this is a midnight thing. This is 100% midnight. They're gearing up for midnight, and was it like Midnight and Last Titan or something like that? They're gearing for those to be like huge dramatic expansion shifts into this particular part of the game. I 100%, I really do foresee 10-man mythic rating. Flex can still go to heroic. You still run with all your buddies. You drop it down to a 10-man, so it's closer to Final Fantasy. It makes the accessibility better. You change the mythic lockout system if you can. If it's not on their radar, you have a tier or two where you change the design philosophy, and whether it's perceived as harder, better, worse, more difficult, whatever, slower, faster, you force a change in World of Warcraft rating that hopefully still offers you player retention, but that really starts to warp the landscape to where stuff is integrated. Your add-ons are more utility focused. Even when he said like an add-on to take care of the computational stuff, that's within the means of him already saying 3 times, at some level we're going to say cut that shit out. At some level, we're going to say, no. We don't want you doing that. There will be a computational solve. It's not going to be assigning markers onto someone's head and moving them to predetermined world markers. I think that they want that gone.
We've seen, initially when they came out, they were like kind of, a lot of friction was involved, and then I think they were done really, really well in a couple of cases, starting in Amir Drasil, where they were a mechanic like P1 Fire Act. You had the circles you had to quickly spread out for. They were pretty fast, but they were too fast to use a macro for it, and it basically forced the players into something they would have used a weak aura for, to just do the mechanic normally. And like, are there lessons you've learned there of like, this is actually how we can design mechanics or kind of assignment things going forward?
Okay.
And then also, is this, if done successfully, would this also remove private auras as what would have been, I guess, kind of a temporary solution to the weak aura problem?
Yeah, we've definitely learned a lot from how private auras have rolled out. Certainly we understand that if we're ever using it on something that like is on a long enough time frame that macros are going to let you solve it and it's punishing enough to not solve it, all we're doing is creating an extra annoying hoop to jump through, and we like hotfixed off the private aura designation from some of those back in Amir Drasil, and we've let that shape how and where we use or don't use it going forward. So yeah, I think examples like the Farak mechanic that you mentioned are ones where like when we know that everyone is in a level playing field, everyone just has to play the game, play the mechanic. We can tune it accordingly so that it's hard but doable. We'd like to be able to do more of that for sure.
Yeah, I see the Fyrak first intermission, which was a private aura and then had to get hotfixed off of the private aura, as sort of a cautionary tale for if there's a mechanic that is only doable with the weak aura assignments, and then we take away that without giving an adequate replacement, then it's worse than
I don't
doing
remember
it.
enough about this
What would
particular one they're
mechanics
talking about.
like that look like in a world where we don't have a computational solution to it, right? Would it be slower and fewer sets of like?
So that's where I think this, and I've mentioned it, I really think that's where this goes. I really think that there is going to be a tier where I think the top guilds will have still a competent race and still a competitive race that maybe takes the same amount of time, like a week, week and a half, 2 weeks, maybe a little bit faster. Because we were up to like day 11 with raiding here. I could foresee it being the same thing, but it's Gallywix levels, right? There's a good portion of people having to natty solve the fight and adjusting to, we tried to write an add-on to tell us we need to go here, here, and here for this mechanic, and it just simply didn't work. And so now we have to adjust to it. I think that there's going to be a tier where they will push, and it's going to be a complete redesign. And it's not that we're going to see new mechanics, but we're going to see stuff that they feel should be solved within the group and like on the fly, just to start the wave of this change. And I think I honestly think it'll be fine, but I think it's going to be some of the best examples. If they gave a Mythic Raider 2.5 seconds to solve, if they change that to 4, that's damn near double the time for a Mythic Raider who was already able and conditioned to respond in 1.5. Giving them 4 seconds and then saying there's not an add-on, there's probably not going to be much different. They'll probably have that 1.5 to 2 seconds to compute the solve in their head and in their groups, and they're still going to only need it 1.5 to react anyway, right? And it'll still be fine. You'll make it more fair, and I think that will also, little increments like that would allow other players that are starting to experience that level of rating to say, this is a fair amount of time. You start conditioning people, you start training people, you start making people better because they're used to seeing these things consistently, right? If you've got a swirly on the ground and you got 2.5 seconds to move out of it, number one, there's usually no indicator of how long you have to move out of it before that swirly is bad. For what it's worth, think of like the spark engineers in Floodgate, like how those pulses go on the ground. You've got time to move out of it, but you have no idea how long it's going to last on the floor. If you knew how long it was going to last and they gave you an extra 20 to 30%, instead of, oh my God, do I clip this cast and get out? You might be like, no, I finish my cast and then I move. Oh, I finished my cast, one appeared under me. Well, I probably won't have enough time to make my next cast, so I'll move. If you change the pace to that and you let people naturally work stuff out, you could eventually move down in the future to like, okay, Mythic, instead of having 4 seconds, you got 3.5 on this tier. On this particular mechanic, it's usually a 4-second solve mechanic. We're going to make it 3. Now we're ramping up that. Okay, we're going to kind of bring you guys back into like that quick. All right, we're going to shorten that gap a little bit. All right, we're going to test you guys. We're really going to, this mechanic's meant to test you. It's normally a 4-second mechanic. We're going to give you that 2.5. Oh, okay, now we really got to make sure. Now we got to change our comp and our calls before this even happens so we can adjust to this. Raiders would have already done it. But now you introduce a landscape where it is, and it's not just, we saw a mechanic. We've got 4 seconds to solve. Write an add-on for it. All right, cool. We solved it in 1.5 with a 95% success rate, and we're good. Carry on.
Like lower damage numbers on these things?
I think probably a bit of all of that. There's multiple knobs there.
Mm-hmm.
There's, on Mythic, we might default to like everyone in today's world, everyone in the raid has to participate in this, and there's enough things to be soaked that if anyone isn't doing it, it's not going to work out. Versus maybe shifting to a world where there's a little bit more slush, things are a little bit slower, there's a little bit more time to react, to get into place organically based on which buff you were assigned, stuff like that. That at the end of the day.
I don't know much about like Final Fantasy rating or other rating at the top, but would there ever be, or is there a difficult level that's comparable to WoW's Mythic that people say isn't as much like cognitive overload? Like when I was watching Final Fantasy, it felt like while things may have been moving fast, you were implementing strategies that you've used before and then updating them to that fight, right? Which kind of changes the progression. It didn't seem like from WoW's rating space, this is going on, 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 this is going on. It seemed like mechanic coming in, problem, adjust, solve, new thing, problem, adjust, solve, pre-move, problem, adjust, solve, which could be repetitive, but it seemed like it was very sort of methodical. It feels, again, I keep saying it, they are going to change the rating landscape with this. They are trying to. I think it's going to make it more accessible potentially. This to me screams like if the changes come through like I think, there's no reason why I wouldn't try and chase a CE. If there's a 10-man group that we can put together, if, a casual guild could get the cutting edge achievement after like 2 or 3 months of prog in there, which would be like the same amount of time that we'd be doing in like heroic. And it's just that we're on the outside. I've been watching these fights and it's like frontal, move, this, that, this, overlap, this, that, everybody. It feels like instead of from a watching standpoint and saying, okay, I'm really trying to process how these guys are doing it that fast, that you get in there and you'd be like, okay, no, there's like 3 things happening, but if you just stop for 10 seconds, you can realize, okay, this is going to come out. If this does, I need to react. If not, I'm waiting for this. Once this happens, I need to do this, and there's either this, or this. And you've got enough time to say, okay, I need to go here. Which one is open? That one? Cool. I got to blink there. I got to dash there, but I've got enough time to get there. It's going to make this more fun for everybody.
Our goal here is to preserve challenge.
Mm-hmm.
And we know that we'd have to design encounters differently in some cases to deliver roughly the same level of challenge in terms of how many pull counts it takes, just what progression looks like while living in a different mechanical world. And I know that when we talk about restricting any kind of add-on functionality, many players very rightly kind of reflexively say or ask, well, how am I supposed to do this boss in this tier without my weak aura?
You can't. And see, you won't be able to ask that anymore. You won't be able to ask that anymore. It's going to be really hard to look back at old fights and be like, how are you supposed to do that without that? You weren't ever supposed to. That shouldn't have been implemented like that anyway. We should have given you something that you can do that is difficult, that you can fail, that you will likely fail, but is still executable with 85 to 100% accuracy, right?
Would be impossible. And the reality is, if you couldn't use that weak aura, that mechanic would be designed or tuned differently. We would have ended up.
Mm-hmm. What I just said. It was designed incorrectly anyway. We gave you 2.5 seconds because we felt like in the current landscape, that is considered a challenge. When in reality, we were compensating for the fact that we wanted to give you 5 seconds, but if you guys aren't going to take 3 seconds to talk it out and you're just going to have an add-on spit it out in 0.5, you only need 2.5 seconds to resolve. Compared to, sorry, that's not going to tell you where you need to go. You have to figure it out, but we'll give you time to do it. And I really feel like there's going to be a super cautious tier that and I think I was trying to say this earlier, but I get sidetracked super easy because I'm a freaking yapper. There will be a tier where they implement this, where the Mythic Raiders will basically say that it was simple, that it was easy. But I think the dev team would rather have that If they messed up and they say you have 10 seconds to figure out each mechanic, that's clearly way too long. But it'd be better to do that and then start to whittle that down. Those 10-second solve timers go down to 8. 20% change, huge number technically, but still not enough. Mythic Raiders are still solving it in 3.5. Everybody else is solving it between 5 and 7. All right? So it's probably still too easy. You know what? Maybe that timing works for normal. Shrink it down. Shrink it down. You get to 2 tiers at the end. Everyone is used to, you got 4 seconds to resolve a mechanic. You have a comfortable amount of time to resolve a mechanic. If there's an overlap, you'll have to solve one, wait for something, and you'll have a small window to solve the next one. I think that's what we're going to be headed to.
Nerfing it right away or designing it differently over the course of even just PTR testing. And so that's like any future design in this space will have to be built from the ground up with that in mind. And I think, you know, it's making it a little bit more forgiving in a way that makes the challenge human rather than superhuman, as it often.
I swear to God, I would have loved to have been in this room. I would have loved to have been in here. I feel like I'm understanding what Ian's putting down. I know there's a lot of people out there that are like, oh my God, Blizzard, small indie company, and like Rage and whatever. And whatnot. I don't get spun up over being super emotional in games. You just got to be practical about stuff. And this is a very practical, straightforward, almost from the heart of the technical lead design people that are telling you, yeah, we need to see some change and we're going to see some change. And even what's really got me hyped up is a lot of this stuff, you hear Ian say 1 or 2 like sentences, and it's not hard to figure out where he's going. It's not hard to figure out where the problems have been. It's not hard to figure out what the future is going to be. I might need to upload this because I think I'm freaking right. I really do. And I really think that I'm probably going to be going for CEs. I can't get away from this game, dude. I just wanted to quit. I just canceled my sub, man.
Often is when we're looking at like cutting edge, mythic tuned things. Because I mean, you guys are really good at the game, as it turns out. And we want to make a boss that
is challenging to you guys.
Challenge and is going to take you dozens of attempts, 100 plus to beat. We do have to take into account the fact that not just you, but every Mythic Raid guild that's going to follow in your footsteps are going to be using these tools. And at the end of the day, I think players do want challenging bosses. That if, you know, we just tuned the boss around none of those things, players used all those tools, and they went in and like a late Mythic boss was dying in a single night for like, you know, a cutting edge guild, rank 500 or whatever, that probably doesn't match what they're looking to get out of Mythic raiding. In my estimation. And so like our goal is to keep the same overall level of challenge while paring down the complexity a little bit.
Even if you look at the history of bosses this would have affected, you actually, even looking at Mythic Plus, something where the complexity has gone down from pack to pack in this patch, but the reality is you can still find challenge in it because it's infinitely scaling, and there you will get to a point where it's doing too much damage to you, or the amount of damage you need to do is too high. There's been Mythic bosses that have been simple mechanically, but have been unbelievably difficult, and that's been true all the way down the guild ranks. It's not
as soon as he said that, I didn't even raid Denathrius, or I didn't even raid Nathria, and I swear to God, I immediately thought Sludgefish. I never did the fight, and I immediately thought Sludgefist.
Sludgefist, Kaiveza, where you've created really intricate problems to solve where weak auras basically didn't matter. Halandris, you actually put a bomb timer very clearly in the game around the bomb. You did not need a weak aura for one of the hardest bosses ever, right? It's more just basically the solution for these weak auras has been just a very specific kind of assignment mechanic that is just like, oh, it's just so much easier to do this, right? Build in a lot of that computational stuff in game to where even if weak auras existed, you would find people just being like, I don't know, the game just kind of does it. We have players that don't use audio sounds in weak aura packs because on bosses like Skarn, on most other bosses, there's like either an in-game sound for when the bombs are actually activating or a voice line. We have 2 players in our guild that use very minimal weak auras, and they literally listen to voice lines.
I think he's talking about Sang, right? I remember him talking about it this tier. I'm pretty sure he said Sang uses the what he's saying is like he uses the audio cues from bosses and voice lines to know that's something. as someone who uses a lot of the in-game stuff already to determine what's going on, people exist like that. It's easier for me to understand because I watched it, and because my brain had to decipher what was going on. That's how I learned, right? That is, I learned better by myself, getting assignments from the teacher and reading and teaching myself and going to ask the teacher for questions. I do better when I sit there and lecture and I listen to a teacher live and I take notes. We all just learn different. We all just process different, but we can still get to the same damn conclusion. Not everybody processes and learns in the same way. So when they say people feel like they need to get the add-ons, I really feel like that's just a majority of people who likely just learn a different way, or feel like that's the only way to learn or the most effective way to learn. But for what it's worth, Blizzard, there's most of the time, I could probably raid lead and decipher a fight just from playing it a few times. With all the other people who are doing stuff and being able to aggregate what they say, it's not always about an add-on, right? I'm a walking GBM. I'll call boss mechanics like all the time. And it's just from watching the fight, and especially in the heroic level, when you realize that it's just like a choreographed, scripted dance, you're really just repeating stuff on a cycle because you learned what the script was. It's the same thing.
For when mechanics are going to happen, and it's extremely accurate, right? So I think a lot of these things are already built into the baseline game. It's just about choosing like when and how to apply them.
Absolutely. And yeah, I think your example, going back to Nathria of Sludge Fist, I think is a great one, right? Like a lot of that was just practice and just learning like how to react to these situations when chained to different partners and dodging the stuff. And people were in enough situations over enough time, they kind of develop that muscle memory, that sense of planning, and eventually your guild as a whole overcomes the challenge. Compared to, let's say, the Stone Legion generals that came after it, a couple of issues there, but like one of the central mechanics that was being solved by weak auras was like, all right, there's a whole bunch of soaks that need to be covered over the course of the fight, and it's not realistic to have that like 7 to 8 soaks up simultaneously, where you need to also account for like, well, this person just got targeted by different mechanics, so they need a backup to go in and do it for them.
Yeah, so it sounds initially like it's, we're restricting what add-ons can do, but really we're opening up the universe of mechanics that can exist in a WoW boss without, because there are so many that you could think of right now where all of them would be, this is going to get solved by this, right? This is going to get solved by this, but if that's not the answer, then now the designers have all these tools back and we can get...
The change to the WoW rating landscape is going to be players and developers all adjusting at the same time. I believe that's what they're trying to do. They've been going back and forth. Finally, the guy at the top said, that's enough. This is not how I want to run my game. This is not how I want stuff to go. I'm sorry, but this has to change. We're going to bring stuff down. We're going to reset here. We're going to set a new fucking foundation, and we're going to build from there. But we got to stop and slow down. And there's going to be a tier or an expansion of just filling this out. There's going to be so much complaint about the new perception of difficulty, when in reality, it's going to be everybody learning the game again. It's kind of like looking at ourselves compared to our classic days. Not classic in the current sense, vanilla, right? Not only were these things not there, so we weren't training them, but our ability to get the information that we need about a game and find ways to optimize it and figure out the best solution, that is what has changed. Now that we're going to mess with that, it's just the same thing. The growing pains we're going to have is people adjusting to a new landscape where these things don't exist, but in reality, a lot of us probably want this to be somewhere closer to the norm. And even if it's not us, the people who design the game want to establish a new norm.
These mechanics that maybe haven't been used since MOP because we've been weak auring them ever since, and now we get to solve them with our brains again.
How cool would it be? Because I think this tier is one of the first tiers where I'm like, realizing where stuff is copied, right? My favorite mechanic that I notice all the time right now is I call it corrupt, right? It's from Grim Batol. Those last 3-4 mobs that'll target someone, channel into them, high damage, you only can heal through it or mitigate. That's it. Mobs in Grim Batol did that last season. There was only really one. This season, Priory has it. Motherload definitely has it. There might be another one. And it's just hard channel into somebody. It's the same mechanic. It's just reworded with a different skin color. But it's the exact same fucking thing. There's no variance. I see that and I have to handle it the exact same way. Imagine how many mechanics from other expansions, which is what they're saying, haven't been used because they just threw them in the trash. Because no matter what, it's just gonna, they're just gonna weak aura. Maybe we'll change it up and do it like a different way. No, they just weak aura it again. All right, so we just bin group soak mechanic. We just fucking toss it in the bin. How cool is it gonna be to like, oh snap, this one from this fight, like, you know, like Armageddon soaks. I think Armageddon soaks from KJ showed up in Muggsy, right? Same mechanic. Something explodes, you have to stand in it. If you don't, it does a big explosion. And I think we've seen that too. There's different from soak versus you need to stand in this, so it does a big AoE something, right? You start seeing different mechanics like that get reintroduced. Again, rating's going to look different. If we have to develop our own version of like a Final Fantasy Cardinal soak, right? And now that becomes a mechanic that you may see on certain fights. Well, we haven't seen it for X amount of tiers, X amount of expansions. Now it's a new thing that can be tossed in there. Now other fights can be designed that have this that you have to deal while dealing with other problems. This is a new combination we haven't seen before. Maybe this is the area where I was asking him, like, if you've got problem 1 through 100, how the fuck do you get 101? And how do you make 101 not just some other variation of 1 through 100? Or have you had 1 through 100, you've locked away 51 through 100, so you're only using 1 through 49. You make these changes, you unlock those again. Now we've got a whole new landscape of mechanics.
And he even mentioned too, he said like, well, there's a lot of swirlies now.
Yeah.
Because that's the thing, like, oh, we can always default to this and a few other things because you know you're not going to solve that with weaker, so we can add fights where that's not a thing. But if you remove that, you know, that friction of there's too many swirlies goes away. And I think there's assignment, like doing a lot of these assignment bosses without a weak aura that could work would be like really fun.
Max has fidgety hands. So if you look, Draddy's kind of like me. I'll usually like kind of keep my hands like in front of me. Try not to be too active with it. Max is so fidgety. It's so adorable.
Like it's fun to do that. It's fun when you have 5 people that need to soak something like the last phase of Gallywix. There's a front hole on a side of a room and 2 people die. And right now weak aura is just like, okay, well then we're going to assign backup. So these 2 people get a big green thing on their screen, go soak that. That is something where that fight is spread out enough where you could actually communicate that. We need 2 people on the right to back up because 2 soakers are dead. Who can do it? This person says something, this person says something.
You just need to figure out what is that window of time between Mythic, Raider, or Mythic, Normal, or Mythic, Heroic, and Normal difficulties that applies the level of pressure and execution and difficulty to each one of those.
Heroic and Normal, maybe won't be in comms, whatever, but in Mythic, that's perfectly reasonable, right? A lot of the things, like, we could probably count, honestly, on 1, maybe 2 hands over the last, like, 4 or 5 years, how many bosses would you meaningfully have to have a mechanic change, but they are very impactful, very memorable, and they have been purely defined by that. Are you worried at all about the communities, and this has certainly been ramping up over time, like you mentioned, even for us, we were much more just do the mechanic 4 or 5 years ago than we are now. Are you worried that there has been this built-in reliance on it that might be hard to shake when creating new raid bosses?
This is called inertia. Inertia is a financing. Well, it's a financial term. No. I can't remember what it was. No. We used inertia in information systems. And this specifically refers to the pushback and a lack of willingness to change because things already are what they are. So Are you worried that players have built up a reliance on add-ons, and are you worried about a lack of inertia to switch back? And I would say yes. If players have already felt that something is necessary before they step into something and even see it and process, and they go, nope, we're not doing this unless you have the add-on. Puck groups aren't allowing you to do OAB without the add-on. They're screaming. They're not saying, hey, we're going to get a couple pools that you guys see. No, that's not the landscape that we work in, right? Maybe a prog group, but I would say that even an actual guild prog group probably still has the majority of them say, someone said we need to download this week order pack for this boss, so make sure you go get it. Not even knowing what the damn thing does. Just, yeah, it said we need to go get it, we need to go get it. That's clearly. They're addicted. They're addicted to the need of add-ons to play. Even if in the end, they're not actually paying attention to those add-ons and they're just screaming at them in the background and they miss the mechanic anyway.
Absolutely. And I think that some of that gets back to us knowing that we need to really ease into this, that any world where we just kind of rip the Band-Aid off and say, all right, have fun, honestly, we're in a new world, as opposed to, building up more built-in functionality.
Draddy has made 3 looks off camera. Is this the prompter? Is Draddy looking at the prompter right now? Bruh, I'm sorry. Draddy's eyes have gone away like 3 times.
It might be hard to shake when creating new raid bosses.
Absolutely. And I think that some of that gets back to us knowing that we need to really ease into this, that any world where we just kind of rip the Band-Aid off.
Right there.
And say, all right, have fun,
honestly,
we're in a new world.
Once again. His eyes are not.
To, building up.
They go again.
More built-in functionality, starting to,
I think there's got to be a prompter. There's got to be a prompter for the next question, and Draddy might be looking at it. I do want to listen to what he said, which is.
To this, that any world where we just kind of rip the Band-Aid off and say, all right, have fun, honestly, we're in a new world, as opposed to, building up more built-in functionality, starting to have clearer visuals, simplify some mechanics, and then building counters and to have classes designed around a world where we know that this isn't possible. As long as people are set up for success, I think we'll be fine.
So I think this is the closest thing that you would probably get to some sort of a roadmap for this. It sounds like they're having the rotation assistant come in the 0.7 patch, which is probably relatively soon. The thought did cross my mind of, well, if they were to start doing these changes, when would they implement them? And I kind of hinted already that I think this is a midnight thing. They didn't just wake up and crank this out in the past few months. This has probably been going since World Within development started, knowing that they were going to eventually come to this, and they've probably just been designing encounters with the almost like the we're going to address it soon. We just can't right now. Okay, we will get to that. If that's the case, I really don't see this happening before midnight. The only caveat I would say, maybe there are a few sneaky encounters in the final patch of War Within that drive towards this direction. Maybe there is a throwaway world boss where they test some of these encounters or test some of these changes. Maybe there are 2 or 3 early bosses in the raid. Since those are supposed to be kind of loot pinatas anyway, it'd be the last one of the season. Maybe they're a little more free and loose with how they're doing. And, we see a second and a third boss that are just different, right? You go into the fight, you play the fight, and you're like, it just feels different, right? There's no add-on restriction, nothing like that. Maybe it's a couple of the things they talk about implementing. Maybe it's like a different visual. Maybe it's a different indicator. Maybe they throw a couple different mechanics at you. Maybe they kind of put out this vibe that we're going to private aura a couple of these and, you know, maybe sort of dissuade some sort of add-on implementation, right? Just as like a test, just to be like, we're going to put this mechanic in there. We're going to find a way that it can't be solved with an add-on, and we're just going to do it to test. I think largely this is a midnight function, and it very well, but I don't think this would be great, could be something that's more of a Last Titan. But I don't, with the way he's talking right now and then releasing this, I feel like this is soon. That this is relatively soon in the WoW landscape.
Certainly, if we were to disable any functionality and then players went into a new tier and like we're just wiping to bosses and like they used to clear heroic comfortably and now they're like brick walled halfway through heroic, yeah, players like that would be a
Would that be a result of not having an add-on though?
source of tremendous frustration. But we know that we need to avoid that by any means possible, and we have a lot of work to do before we get there.
Something that really encourages me is the ping system. That seems like such a perfect way to give us an option to identify where we're going, right? You can just ping where you're going, and then you don't have to, you know, try and communicate with words. Hey, I'm going to move over to the left 20 yards, right? Just ping where I'm going, and that opens up an ability to solve these again in a YOLO style, right, rather than an
I think your guild did that.
Yeah.
So the Echo of Neltharion, right?
Yeah, we
like,
just pinged it.
yeah. So
Go for it,
famously,
yeah.
like everyone had the maps for that. Like, here's your exact spot you go, and then his guild was like, you know what? Everyone just ping your spot. Mostly it gets covered. People go to the same spot every pull. But if you see two pings in a spot, one person has to move, right? And that could largely solve a mechanic with just something that's already built into the game.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think and the ping system is something we've also talked about looking to improve.
Ping system is
Grow
beans.
Sorts of things you can do with it.
It tries so hard.
More tools to solve these problems in a coordinated way.
The ping system tries so hard, but I think it's doing it from a 3D perspective, not an isometric, which is like I don't know. It feels like that's part of the problem. It could just not be a very good ping system. But I'm thinking like shooters and whatnot. Most shooters have like a decent ping. You touch the item, you point at the ground, you point in the distance, point at a player. But something about WoW pings, man. Like you'll try to ping a ground and it'll ping some person, and you're like, "The fuck you ping me for?" It's like I was trying to ping the ground next to you, dude. I'm sorry. I'm not trying to troll you.
But using their own skill and expression instead of another tool.
When I think of World of Warcraft, I'm always thinking back to when I first started playing the game, and there was this really exciting moment where I looked at it and I'm like, oh my god, I can make this game look however I want, right? Like I can put this here, I can have an add-on that tells me what time it is in London, what time it is in Darnassus, right? I can have all the world clocks there if I want. I can have 3 different bars at the bottom of my screen. I can do whatever I want there, and to me that's always been a strength, not a weakness of WoW. So I think there's a lot of people that disagree with me on that, but then there's also people that they hear about Blizzard thinking about restricting add-ons and they're worried about losing that. Is there any intention to go after any of that kind of customization?
No, I don't think this has. Why am I answering the questions like I'm a stupid freaking dev? Not a stupid. Like, why am I asking the question like I'm a freaking dev? I should be letting them answer and responding to that. No. For the add-on talk that they've had, they have been clear. If it's cosmetic, if it's utility, we are not trying to fuck with it. Okay? We don't care about your transmog stuff. We don't care about your quest helpers. We don't care about your TomTom and your coordinates and whatnot. They may want to integrate some of that stuff in, but they do not care. What they care about specifically, weak auras and DBM problem solving. That's what they care about because it limits their design philosophy and what they can present as an accurate challenge for players, and it limits the growth and the expansion and application of new mechanics if everything is just going to be auto-solved.
Not whatsoever. And in fact, we're doing everything we can and we would do everything we can down the line to minimize any collateral damage to them. But the goal is anything that's cosmetic should be completely fair game.
Yep.
All informational stuff that's out of combat, like again,
Yep.
RP add-ons, helping
Yep.
as they're tracking, helping with concussions, tracking gather.
They're not coming for your Titan loot, boo-boo. Okay? They're not coming for your farming add-ons. Okay? They don't care. It's not a part of the game that they care about.
Nodes, helping you with quests, like you name it, a bunch of accessibility add-ons, all of those, like there's nothing harmful whatsoever about any of them. The only thing is, at the very end of the day, once we feel like we've done enough on our end to improve baseline functionality, what we'd be looking at is the ability to parse real-time combat events in a way that drives, problem solving on the fly.
He's been so clear about it. If anybody bitches about this, they're not paying attention.
We build the scaffolding to then be able to take away the existing weak aura solutions that we have for these. How much of this is, so the thing that's excited me also about edit mode has been, it's so clearly based on what the community has learned over 20 years, right? It's like, oh, the community has revolved around this.
What is this? I never noticed this before. Is this a new version of the edit mode?
This is a solution.
I really have to play my UI.
Let's give them that base in the UI rather than making them download something. How much of this initiative is still going to be based on what the community says, how the community reacts, versus which of these things are already kind of locked in decisions?
I'd say basically nothing here is locked in.
Okay.
Really, my hope today is to kind of begin a conversation about direction.
We're getting you guys ready for what's coming. It's the nicest way I can tell you. It's gonna happen.
The community on what areas we might be wrong on and should reconsider. Because I think at the end of the day, this game belongs first and foremost to our millions of players. We're trying to serve them as best we can in the long run. And I think our sense is that for many players, the feeling that they have to download and use certain add-ons in order to play the game competitively isn't really part of what's attractive about the game or healthy in the long run. And so if we can pull things back to a place where add-ons are available for those who want to use them, but people aren't feeling pressured by their groups, by just the natural demands of competition and not wanting to lose out to someone who's using more advantages, then that's going to be the healthier route in the long run.
So if I was the kind of person who wanted to write a 10-paragraph forum manifesto, this would be one of the topics to do it on, right?
Absolutely. We'll be reading, we'll be listening. I think this is a long path ahead.
Which is especially like the SWTOR UI
yeah,
customization
just,
tool.
Curious
I mean, it
about
really
the
did.
Conversation and hear how people feel about it. So Rotation Assist is coming in 11.1.7.
It is.
We'll be hitting the PTR in the very near future. Can't wait to hear people's feedback as they're able to hop on and check it out. We'll be listening closely so we can make it the best it can be for everybody. It's also been amazing to just get a chance to talk through kind of the history of add-ons in WoW, where they are today, and where they might be going in the future. Thank you guys for coming out. It's really been a pleasure.
Yeah, thanks so much for having us here. Really looking forward to see what the community has to say about how much they want more of these casts, maybe monthly, maybe bi-weekly, weekly, whatever you guys think, put it in the comments.
Draddy trying to get that bag, bro. He's like, how often do you guys want to pay me to come out here?
Awesome.
Draddy, don't lie. Draddy, don't lie. That was literally how often do you guys want to pay me to come out here? Because I'll come out here and yap with you anytime. You can have the potty C, but the WoW cast, I'm pretty sure that's going to bring in some numbers. All right. We're going to take a little break here a little bit. Alfie, you're 100% right. So I do want to go back to the customization tool. A little frame.
How much of this is, so the thing that's excited me also.
I mean, you're not wrong. Here's what I would say. I don't know how long SWTOR had their UI customization thing in there, but it was long enough that I think it was probably standard for a while, and WoW hasn't had it. WoW's a little bit behind in some of this stuff, dude. I think they relied on the add-on landscape to really handle some of this stuff. Even if it wasn't an expectation, if it was already being handled, why would you implement it yourself and dedicate the resources to it compared to just letting the add-on take care of it. But at some point, you do need to develop the stuff, because if an add-on functionality isn't being managed, if the developer stops, if people are reliant on it and it's no longer available, it's going to require the community to recreate it. And if they don't, you're not going to have it. At this point, I would either say buy out the developers to integrate it into your own so you can get that development knowledge onto your team, or you just start figuring out and hiring people that can reverse engineer and start implementing this stuff for your game. This one looks simpler to understand, this one. Something WoW does very good. They see what other MMOs do and bring them to WoW. Yeah. I will, listen, WoW is a professional grade copycat sometimes, okay? Just because you're the greatest doesn't mean that other people don't have portions of stuff that you should update and upgrade to. There we go. Well, shite. I'm going to take a quick second here because I know the pup needs to go out. And then we'll chill for a few minutes. And I haven't done a 4-hour stream in a long-ass time. So, yeah. Also, SWOTOR has a XP bonus event from May 1st to something. Why? I was done. I was good. And now I have to log on and level my Republic Deontrell. I'm so mad. I am so mad right now. I was done. And now I've got to actually level Deontrell, get my Republic side character going, and then start showing up to morning group story mode operations. So, yeah. I'll be back. Are you in here? Oh, you are. Let's go. Use XP events a few times a year. Yep. I'm going to... I'll be honest. I will very likely be hopping back on SWOTOR So here's the crazy caveat. I just canceled my WoW sub a couple days ago. I was kind of gonna take a break till end of the next match. In between, trying to find stuff to play, and I heard about the XP event, so I will probably be on SWOTOR grinding my other character because I would like to do story mode operations, and currently not Republic side, so yeah. I was gonna come back and stream for another 30, but I think I'm gonna wrap it for the day, partially because I gotta go be human for a second. I gotta use the body. I will be back on tomorrow, and with it being the first, well, we know what's gonna happen. I have Republic side Deontrell, who is just another sniper. I'm solely doing it just to get a level 80 to go on story mode ops with Swotorista. So it's just another sniper. I think it's the one that I pre-made already with the level 70 character boost. So I don't have to learn another class. I can just play the same one again. So I guess I'll be back on the grind tomorrow. I'll see you in the morning at about 10 o'clock, and we'll jump right back in and do it again. Expedition 33 and Oblivion are on the list. So I don't know, Alfie, if you have any interest in either one of those games, Expedition 33 or Oblivion. Trooper, I think so. God damn it, hold on. Here, let me see if I can find it real quick. Oh, I'm not gonna do that because I'm gonna end up posting my freaking I'm gonna be stupid and end up posting my fucking password online. I will double check here in a little while. I'm gonna go run to the potty and wrap it up for the day. I will be on tomorrow morning, and then we'll be good to go. Last couple days of announcing got announced tonight, and then tomorrow, and then I'm done announcing for the season, and then we're on summertime hours. I appreciate you. You're here, Alfie. That's all that matters, okay? Something, Datacrons, something with